Good evening, wrestling fans. Welcome to the GCRN Podcast Arena for the GeekCast Radio Top 100 Wrestlers Countdown. Coming to the ring are your hosts, representing the GCRN, Kevin Optisolo Thompson.
Money isn't everything, it's the only thing.
And representing RavingHipster.com, TV's Mr. Neil.
The whole wrestling world is going to stand up and take notice.
And from the Great White North, representing This Week in Geek, Alex White Heat Ritchie.
On board!
And now, here is our main event. 100 wrestlers enter. Who will be number one? Let's find out. Let's get ready to podcast.
Hello and welcome back to GeekCast Radio Network's Top 100 Wrestler Countdown. I am your host, Optimus Solo, and joining me for today's portion of the countdown, it's a triple threat, so to speak, for this episode. We have TV's Mr. Neil. Hello.
What?
I like it. Short and to the point. And returning from episode 1, Alex, how are we doing?
Good. I don't have any.
Trying to think of something clever, and I didn't want to, and I just couldn't do it on the fly.
Yeah, I'm returning from the rival company, I guess.
We don't want to give you too much fanfare. We have booted out the Simplistic Review Tag Team, so we will see if they make a return appearance for the final chapter in this countdown. But today we're going to be covering numbers 50 through 26. But before we do that, I want to just take a couple minutes to get some pre-talk out of the way. Alex, I want to start with you. You were not present on the record last time, but you have had a chance to catch up and listen to entrance 75 through 51, as well as all the corrections. What do you think of the first half of the countdown so far?
I think it makes a little more sense from it. It was a little odd, some of the way the things stacked up, but then again, it all depends on how many. Did you see how many people actually submitted their lists for this?
No, there was more than a dozen.
Okay, so yeah, wildly different backgrounds, wildly different, voting. So I'm assuming that's where some of these people stacked up. Right. I'm gonna say, like, whether I might have had a personal, thought like some people should have been on, should have been off. I think that the way it now is settled is more in line with how I would have predicted it probably would have gone. Mm-hmm. So
that makes sense. When I think of these countdowns, it always kind of breaks down, as weird as it is, because we used to do these in 5 episodes. We would do 20 entrants at a time when we first started doing the top 100s. Then we broke it down to 25 at a time. But it really seems to, over the different countdowns we've done, really separate into 4 distinct groups. So in your 100 through 76, all it takes really to land in that group is somebody who a couple people feel really strongly about. So, I mean, they're probably only showing up on maybe 10% up to maybe 30% of the list. But, if a couple people rank them real high, so it's kind of like that wild card section. Anything can go in that first 25, and that's where you usually get the most surprises. When you get to the episode we did last time, that 75 through 51, it's more so people that most likely you're not going to get too many arguments about them, but whether they belong in the top 100. But they just are wild cards in the fact that they belong, but you don't know where they're going to hit. So, I don't think many people would argue against Terry Funk showing up, or Bam Bam Bigelow, or, the British Bulldog, Rob Van Dam, those types of people that we saw in last week's episode. So this one's kind of like they belong, but nobody's quite sure where they belong. And if it follows suit, what we usually get then the rest of the way is from 50 on, you usually can't get any arguments about whether they belong or not. They're all usually for sure top 100 people or characters or shows or whatever we've gone over in the past. The difference usually between 50 through 26 and then 25 through 1 is the number of boxes they check off. So in the 25 through 1, you're going to have people that are more unanimous, or people that are checking off all the boxes, whereas 50 through 26, they either have 1 or 2 small shortcomings that kind of makes them in this section. We'll have to see if that stays true. Before I get your guys' thoughts, before we start the countdown, I wanted to do this because we haven't done it yet. But when we were sending out these lists and having people vote on the wrestlers, I haven't gone over kind of the criteria I sent out to you guys, that I was trying to hopefully inform the way you guys ranked people and kind of what you felt like was important. So these were the criteria that we kind of set out for people, and it might make some things make more sense as we kind of go forward. But one was just overall success. So that could be titles held, it could be major accomplishments, or some type of big wins along the way. So success in the ring, as far as obviously someone like the Brooklyn Brawler who loses all his matches would not be someone that would probably show up here. Another one would be just general charisma. That's pretty self-explanatory, but goes in hand with another one, which would be mic skills. So charisma and mic skills, being able to shoot promos, interviews, do your build up to matches, your in-ring impromptu, talks and stuff like that. So that might be someone, the example I gave you guys was like why The Rock would probably trump someone like Bill Goldberg. There might be more reasons than that, but that's just one thing that kind of flies off the top of my head. The Rock is really good at promo, so he's going to beat somebody that like Goldberg, even though Goldberg did have some success in the ring. Another thing that we threw out there was longevity. Someone who was able to stay in the business for, an extended period of time versus somebody that was just kind of a flash in the pan. Now, obviously, we've talked already that some people stay too long and it maybe hurts their legacy. So that might be discussions that we have ongoing as well. Impact or importance to the sport or the business, someone who revolutionized an aspect of the business, maybe getting extra points here. We talked about when we were mentioning like superstar Billy Graham and some of those early on people, they definitely had an impact and kind of shaped what other people modeled their characters off of. Just memorable. How memorable they are, maybe they had memorable storylines, memorable matches, memorable moments within the history of wrestling, and then just miscellaneous, anything that you guys wanted to throw out there, the best outfits, the best gimmicks, the best entrance music, best, finishing moves, stuff like that could be something that you kind of played into a part as well. So Neil, what kind of things are you looking forward to as we kind of get through this next set of 25? And, like last week, we saw a lot of tag team halves and things of that nature. Do you think there's going to be something that we see more of in this next section?
I think we're going to see a lot more singles wrestlers this going forward, or people who are more known for being singles wrestlers. Like your Bret Hart and your people who've may have started as like a tag team, but like graduated. Like Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart. I'm trying to think of other examples. I kind of blanked on it. But we're also going to see a lot of mid-carders, like mid to upper carders, like, Dean Malenko, Chris Jericho, Owen, a lot of those guys I think we're going to see. Maybe some remnants of the tag teams, but I can't really think of too many who would show up.
Makes sense. Alex, if it kind of fits what I was kind of prefacing it with some of the criteria, if we see people in this countdown that are checking a lot of the boxes but maybe missing some, are we looking to see like those that maybe had a shorter lifespan, or those that were successful but maybe lacked in mic skills, or what kind of stuff do you think might define this section of the countdown?
It's probably going to be a bit of everything you said there, plus people maybe that were super hot in the 80s or 90s, but then completely disappeared from the landscape, where like this is where I'm drawing a blank, but has Mr. Perfect popped up yet?
Nope.
No.
It's like a Mr. Perfect, somebody who died before the current generation really got to know the person, maybe only knows them from memories, but they weren't so huge like a Macho Man.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like didn't have that crossover super appeal.
That makes sense.
Like that's why, like in my list where you're like, oh, I listed El Santo so high. I've only seen a couple matches, but I knew basically the cultural impact. Like you've got your different styles of wrestling from around the world, but if you really want to boil it down, you've got basically four. You've got American style, and it can be broken down from there into Southern style wrestling and everything. But there's American style pro wrestling, Japanese pro wrestling, the British/European, and Mexican wrestling.
Right.
And he is arguably bigger than anybody in wrestling's ever been to Latin America.
Right.
And in movies and everything, he was basically, if you rolled like Hulk Hogan and The Rock together into one, he might have even been bigger than that to those cultures. So that's why I rated him so high, because it was more important that, like, he was more important to the business, and like without him, you probably wouldn't have lucha wrestling really be popular at all.
Right. No, I agree. And it kind of goes along with some of the other people that were mentioned last week that did crack people's top tens. We had, well, I'm going to throw Blanchard's out because I'm not going to mention the one that he had in the top 10 from last week. But three of them that mentioned that did, no, it was Batista. But the three that did make the other people's top 10 that have already been mentioned were the Nature Boy Buddy Rogers, El Santo, and Antonio Inoki. So I think that's, those are all three people that do kind of represent what impact they had on their regions and things of that nature during their time. So I think that kind of backs up what you're saying with El Santo as well. Another thing that might be interesting that we've kind of been looking at as we've been going through, how many women we have or have had, will we have any more? Some of the classic, era wrestlers, if we'll see more of them, if there's going to be any type of recency bias or any more modern day, because we haven't seen a lot of modern day wrestlers. If we went through last week's, there was hardly any. Honestly, we had Miz and Charlotte Flair, and I guess if you wanted to count the Matt and Jeff Hardy, but they're not necessarily as current as. They're not doing a whole lot these days, I don't believe, unless I'm just missing out on. I mean, I know they appear, but they don't seem to have the impact that they did, like, let's say 10, 15 years ago. Whereas the first episode, we had Nia Jax and Samoa Joe. So we haven't seen a lot of current people. So that'll be something interesting to kind of keep forward, looking at going forward as well. Neil, any other last thoughts before we get into number 50 for today?
Not really. I wasn't even thinking about modern day wrestlers. I think we're going to start seeing them show up.
Right, we'll have to see if that holds true or not. Like I said at the beginning, that first 25, you're probably getting about anywhere from 10 to 30% of the people's list that these wrestlers are being voted on. During today's section, we're talking about closer probably to 50 to 80% of the people's list that these wrestlers would have shown up on. So it definitely took a lot more people to know them and have some universal appeal as we get through this. So, all right, we're going to start the countdown here with number 50. His name has actually already been thrown out by one of you. I'm not going to say which one. Let's see. What kind of names did he go off of? Ring name of Cyclope, Dean Sarkoff. I think TV's Mr. Neil mentioned him already. We're talking about Dean Malenko. Obviously spent some time in ECW, NWA Eastern region, and then WCW for a long time before his last little bit in WWE, and has made an appearance this year in AEW. So that's kind of interesting as well. As far as belts and things of that nature, WCW Cruiserweight Champion 4 times, United States Heavyweight Champion 1 time, a WCW World Tag Team once with Chris Benoit, WWF Light Heavyweight Champion 2 times. He was the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Feud of the Year in 1995 with Eddie Guerrero, and the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Best Technical Wrestler in 1996 and 1997. So one of those things that I didn't mention in the criteria that we had added later on was actual in-ring abilities and kind of your technical ability. And I think this is someone that would definitely fall into that category. Alex, what do you think of Dean Malenko, and is he worthy of being in the top 50?
He is. I've actually not seen a whole ton of his work because it was sort of during that period where I wasn't watching, but I've gone back and seen a lot of it. And yeah, you can see it. He was not the most charismatic guy, very similar to like a Lance Storm. But just, he has a look that you're like, I don't believe you can do everything that you're doing, but you magically can do it. And, if you look at him now, like you see him, he's working as an agent. I think he just left the WWE to work for AEW. Yeah. If he had a gimmick now, it would be the angry Greyhound bus driver. That's sort of what he looks like. He just looks a little old and tired, but he could still kick your ass.
I remember him most for his semi feud with Chris Jericho in WCW, because that was like when Chris Jericho was really showing what he had kind of what he was capable of. And I believe he was making fun of Dean Malenko and he had a list of all the different holds or whatever, and all of that stuff. I think that was directly related to his feud with Chris Jericho. I could be misremembering that, but he had some great cruiserweight matches with the likes of Chris Jericho, Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, and that type of ilk. So I definitely think he is deserving. I actually had him ranked on my list at 51. So obviously I can't be too upset that he comes in here at 50. Neil, what do you think of Dean Malenko here?
He's like a mini Bret Hart. I remember him in the cruiserweight division of WCW, just being this all business, no nonsense guy. He didn't, like what you said, is that he didn't really have much of a personality. But to me, it wasn't like he was bad on the mic. He just didn't really he just really wasn't very expressive. So he just seemed like he was all business. So I kind of bought what he was doing. Yeah. And I love the gimmick again, that his gimmick is that he's a wrestler. He's very serious, has a ton of moves, great sort of like ring psychology, and pairing him with Chris Jericho, one of the legendary feuds of the Monday Night Wars, and that awesome promo that Jericho did with the list. By the way, they went to commercial. This is my favorite part. They went to commercial, and while they're at commercial, I'm talking about Jericho, but he's working the crowd. Then they come back and he's still reading, and then they go back to commercial. That's great. But that whole feud, it just brought out the best of Malenko. And, them going back and forth with the Cruiserweight Championship. I think Jericho even went to the Library of Congress to figure out some sort of rematch clause. It made no sense, but it was hilarious. He was a horseman for a little while, came to WWF, WWE, same thing. Was part of the Radicals, and sadly kind of disappeared after that. He was a great wrestler. I loved him.
Right. Trained by Boris Malenko. I think it fits that criteria that we're talking about, where he's going to be no doubt top 100, but he's going to have some boxes that aren't checked. And, it might be that interview, mic skills, charisma box that's not checked, but I think you could also make the argument that he didn't need it, because it added to kind of his intimidation factor, or kind of his mystique there. So Dean Malenko starts us off at number 50. We're going to go old school here next with number 49. We're talking about somebody that debuted in 1932. Trained by Warren Bockwinkel, Ed Lewis, and a handful of other people. He only had one ring name, but how many people know his real name? Aloysius Martin Thez. We're talking about Lou Thez, and that is who is coming in at number 49. Obviously, very impactful in the early days. A lot of independent work, regional work, NWA work. He's in the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame Pioneer era, class of 2002. He is in the Stampede Wrestling Hall of Fame. He is in the St. Louis Wrestling Hall of Fame. He's in the WCW Hall of Fame in 93, the WWF Hall of Fame in 2016, the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame. You get the picture. He's a lot of Hall of Fames. So Lou Thez, coming in at number 49, was ranked all the way up at number 4 on one of our individual lists. Alex, what do you think of Lou Thez?
He's one of those ones where you can't go anywhere without hearing about how great he was, even if none of us probably ever saw him work.
Right.
He was, everybody seems to talk about, he's one of the guys where it's like, oh, so-and-so isn't doing what the promoter says he's supposed to do. All right, put him in with Lou and have Lou, turn him into a pretzel. And it would be like, and people would actually quit. They'd be like, oh, well, I'm not having a match. Here's your belt back. Because they wouldn't even want to bother with him, because they just knew that he was somebody who would, if he wants to break your arm, he's going to break your arm.
Right.
But at the same time, wasn't he NWA champ a bazillion times?
Yeah, he was a multi-time.
Prior to Flair, I think he was the most, or either longest run or the most runs before him.
The longest run. He was because I think he was 3-time. If it was the problem back then is that NWA was split so many different times that it's hard to say which ones were under which regions and which ones were recognized by what different individuals. But yeah, he was a long time. He also spent some time as a referee later on, in just special matches. It seemed like he reffed Ric Flair versus Dusty Rhodes for the belt in 1981. Big Van Vader versus Hashimoto in the IWGP Heavyweight Championship in the Tokyo Dome in 89, as well as a few others. So, and I only mentioned half of the Hall of Fames he's in because I didn't want to go too long. But Neil, go ahead, keep going, Alex.
Sorry, he's basically when you not even the shooters. He's one of those guys that if you wanted to say wrestling's fake, he's not fake.
Right. Neil, what do you think of Luthez showing up right here?
I think it's a great addition. Again, he's one of these guys where I know the name and I know the face, and I'm not necessarily familiar with his work, but I definitely think he belongs here. Yeah, I was actually trying to covertly look up stats on him. He was the NWA World Champion 3 times, and one time AWA champion, and a bunch of other things that I'm just like, what even is this? So he's got a lot of accomplishments. He was in the WCW Hall of Fame. He was all over the place, recognized, great wrestler everywhere.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, again, one of those, I think, when you go to the classic ones that we have had shown up on our list, I don't think a lot of people are going to be complaining about which names we've had appear so far. So let's move on to number 48 and maybe a wrestling family legacy here that we're going to get to talk about. And we'll see how many people from this family do appear on the list. I'm trying to rack my brain if any have shown up so far, but debuted in 1988. Trained by a couple of people I'm not going to mention. Ring name of the Black Rain, 7. The rest are going to give it away. Goldust, Dustin Runnels, Dusty Rhodes Jr., Dustin Rhodes, artist formerly known as Goldust. However you want to go at it there. That is who is appearing here at number 48.
Well, they call them the Natural.
Did some work in Florida early on, then WCW for a very brief time in the late 80s. Spent some time in Japan and Memphis, WWF, back to WCW, back to WWF, back to WCW, back to WWF. You get the point. TNA a couple times, back to Japan, back to WWE 2 or 3 more times, and now obviously All Elite Wrestling. So the well-traveled Dustin Rhodes. I'll go over his accomplishments in a minute, but TV's Mr. Neil, what do you think of Dustin Rhodes, and is he top 50 worthy?
Oh, yeah. Funny thing is that I figured it out when you said 7, which is maybe the shortest lived gimmicks of all time, just because he came in and he was like, this gimmick sucks, and he stopped being 7 immediately. Was of course Goldust. I remember him coming into WWF. I believe it was like 1990. He came in to support his dad against the $1 Million Man, who had a valet named Virgil, and Virgil was named after Dusty's real name, who was actually Virgil Runnels. And I kind of thought that was funny that Dustin and Dusty Rhodes, their last match was basically putting over Virgil, because that was the match where Virgil turned face. But beyond that, wasn't he in that WCW King of the Road match where he got fired because somebody delayed it or something?
Yeah.
And of course, Goldust. Black Rain, I believe that was in TNA. Very weird gimmick. Yeah, most of what I know him for is Goldust, just because of just how iconic that character was. Probably his most iconic character, other than just himself.
Right. He was WCW US Heavyweight Champion twice, World 6-Man Tag Team Champion once when that was a thing, WCW World Tag Team twice, once with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat and once with Barry Windham, WWF Hardcore Champion 9 times, Intercontinental 3, WWE Tag Team twice with Cody Rhodes / Stardust, one-time tag team with Booker T, got a belt. The Wrestling Observer newsletter, apparently Dave Meltzer does not like Goldust, because get this, worst gimmick of the year 1995 as Goldust, worst gimmick of the year 1997 as the artist formerly known as Goldust, most embarrassing wrestler 1997, worst gimmick 2007 as Black Rain. Like, he must not like Dustin Rhodes for some reason. But
if you asked him now, he probably forgot he even said those things.
Right. Alex, what do you think of Dustin Rhodes and the Rhodes family being represented here at number 48?
Yeah. I'll bet you if you asked him, he'd say he shouldn't be higher than Luthez, but I do think it's a good spot for him, because he's one of the more iconic characters in that instantly recognizable, very memorable, but didn't really accomplish as much as he should have in like the mainstream spotlight, like when it comes to WWF/E.
Right.
I've only been to one house show when they came here about 3 or 4 years ago, actually 2 years ago, and it was actually the last run of house shows that he did.
Mhm.
And so there's about 4,000 or 5,000 of us at our local hockey arena, and when his music hits, I had never experienced it live. His music acoustically was the best sounding. Like, you have all these newer people and even some people from the Attitude Era that popped up. Rhino's music sounded good when he came out, but just the way his Shattered Dreams music hits, it just reverberates and echoes off of the building. And the whole crowd went crazy when he showed up. He was the most over person at the show here. Now, again, we're in Canada, so it's Bizarro land, so maybe he wasn't supposed to be. But I was happy because, like, within 2 or 3 months, he basically disappeared from TV and didn't show up again until AEW. So I got to see him during his last run. Now, that Seven character, wasn't that like the black metal goth Undertaker that he did with like a leather hat or something stupid? It was really weird.
I didn't watch during that time.
Yes,
it was late WCW. It was like basically painted all white. Yeah, he kind of looked like the Undertaker.
Like if the Undertaker joined Marilyn Manson or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So yeah.
We all thought it was the Undertaker just because they didn't show his face a whole lot. We're just like, what the hell's going on here?
Now, he's also, I think, the first person to show up on the list that is a current wrestler that has wrestled in 4 decades. That's still considered an active wrestler.
That's true. Do you think he's more or less worthy than Cody Rhodes of being on the list?
Oh, way, way more. Cody, like, as good as his matches have been and how good he's been as Stardust or on AEW, he's nowhere near like what is like he doesn't have. He has charisma, but he hasn't built enough of a legacy because he was such a low to mid carder forever. He's only really been on top for a year.
Yeah.
That and I can't. I don't know what it is. I can't take him serious with his lisp. It's just it sounds bad, but I'll never be able to take him serious because he never sounds authoritative, if that makes any sense. And it's funny because his father would put out, he would have make fake accents and talk differently because that's not really how he talked. But it's funny because his son actually has a lisp, and then people don't buy into it, and it just, I don't know. He also like Goldust has a better, I guess, stage presence. Like when Cody comes out, he's all smiles and plays to the crowd and everything, but he looks like a person playing a wrestler, even though he has good matches now. He doesn't, whereas Dustin and Goldust always came out very serious. You believe that's who he was, whatever he was doing.
Right. I was thoroughly impressed with Dustin Rhodes' appearance so far in AEW with his match. I did not expect him to be able to pull off the things that he did at his age. I was expecting to see something like we see on WWE when we get like The Undertaker versus, Goldberg or Shawn Michaels for the 700th time or something like that, where Dustin Rhodes held his own in that match. So that was impressive to say the least. Next up, for number 47, we're going to go to another wrestling family royalty, I guess you could say. This man debuted in 1983, was trained by Stu Hart. If anybody's keeping tallies at home of how many people have been trained by Stu Hart, please let me know because I'm not keeping track. He is only known by one other name than his real name. It was either the Blue Blazer or just Owen Hart. Owen Hart comes in here at number 47. Spent most of his time in WWF besides a very, very brief cup of coffee in WCW and then obviously some time in Japan and Mexico. But most of his time staying loyal to the WWF and had a lot of championship gold to go around. As well as just memorable moments and matches. He was WWF European Champion 1 time, Intercontinental twice, Tag Team 4 times, twice with Yokozuna, once with the British Bulldog, and once with Jeff Jarrett. World Tag Team Champion with British Bulldog. Feud of the year. This was when the whole Hart clan was against Stone Cold Steve Austin. He got the best flying wrestler, according to the Wrestling Observer newsletter, in both 1987 and in 1988. TV's Mr. Neal, what do you think of Owen Hart being here at number 47? And is it interesting that it's right after Dustin Rhodes?
Very interesting. Owen definitely belongs in the top 50. He's one of the greatest, maybe one of the greatest underrated wrestlers of all time, just because it took them so long to do anything with him. He was in WWF for a good portion of the 80s, and they didn't like really do anything with him until he turned heel, which was like 94, I think. And he was one of those cases where they really needed to turn him a lot sooner than what they did, just because he was ready like a long time before that to really hit the heights of being a great wrestler in WWF, and just the character of the King of Hearts. That was a great gimmick, and him dominating that main event at SummerSlam '94. I don't even care that they took time away from the Undertaker versus Undertaker match. That was going to suck anyway. So I love that match went. That is a great match. Anyone, you really need to go watch that. And sad that he died when he did. He really should have been given the belt at some point. I think he was on his way to becoming champion at some point.
He's in the Canadian Wrestling Hall of Fame. He's in the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame, just inducted this year. Also in the Luthez Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame last year, so that's interesting. Pro Wrestling Illustrated gave him the Feud of the Year in 1994 with his brother Bret Hart, gave him the Rookie of the Year in 1987. Alex, what do you think of Owen Hart showing up here, and is it in the right spot?
You know what? Hot take here. I don't think he should be in the top 50. I think a lot of people are putting him in here based on nostalgia and maybe potential that he wasn't able to achieve. I don't think he did enough to be even in the top 100. It's more the name is attached to him, and it's like, oh, he was so great for the couple matches he did and the one run he had. It's like, okay, he almost killed Steve Austin. You hear everybody liked him that worked with him, great, but what did he actually achieve? What, King of the Ring? That's it?
Well, he had a European Intercontinental Tag Team Champion 4 times.
Well, European doesn't even exist anymore as a belt, right? So,
neither does the NWA World Heavyweight Championship.
Charlotte Award winner
Charlotte Flair should be higher than him. It's nothing against him. I just don't think, I think he significantly weaker than people let him up to be because he just didn't get to achieve. Like, I feel like this is like the Heath Ledger thing. Like, Heath Ledger won the Oscar. Why? Because he died and everybody talked about him and put in good performances. But would he have been as fantastic? Would we still be talking about him in this echelon? Well, maybe, if he had lived and done more, but he could have easily fizzled out. So, I think he probably deserved to be somewhere in the 75 to 50 mark.
I had him ranked 74. I was never a fan of his growing up. I didn't care for him, but I mean, granted, most of the time he was playing a heel, so maybe that was intentional. I do recognize that he did have some good single feuds, with his brother and some other things. And then he also had the tag stuff with Yokozuna and British Bulldog that was kind of memorable, but I was never a big fan of his individually. Like, I just didn't care for, he played a heel in a way that is not for me. I don't like my heels to be as, whiny, or babyish, I guess, is what the vibe I used to get of him. And this is me interpreting it as a teenager or like a 10, whatever year old. So I liked my heels more of like the rule breaking, conniving, clever, which he did have some of that, but, and we'll talk about some of them probably as they show up here later on the countdown, but he wasn't my type of heel. So that's why I kind of had him down closer to the 75 range.
He was a bigger version of the Miz, basically.
Yeah, I just thought he was kind of funny. Whenever he was on screen, I was always smiling. He was carrying his Slammy Award around, or beating up Jason Sensation for doing an impersonation of him.
I always remember seeing matches of him where, and this is going to be the most petty thing I've ever said on this countdown probably, but the amount of spit that he would get in the sides of his mouth and in general, there was times where he just had spit just chilling on his face, on his mouth, or whatever. And I was just like, God, like somebody tell this guy to like not have so much cotton mouth. I don't know, but
again, those are all valid, right? Like I honestly think had he lived, he would have had an even bigger career. He might not have been like a Shawn Michaels, but his career, had he lived, would have been longer than Brett's. So like he would be somebody that, had he not been injured or hurt,
right,
he might be somebody that you would have seen way past the Attitude Era, because he was fairly young. Like
it's just someone that it's hard to predict how he would have fit in as the era changed.
He would have been somebody probably that ended up going to TNA.
Right, yeah, because it's kind of hard to figure out, like, after the Attitude Era is done, after, you know, the Hearts and everybody else is out, does he survive into that next era? And I don't know if he would have, or if he would have had to go somewhere else.
He would have probably come back in, like, the nostalgia era the last 5-10 years, and he would have been the guy like Goldberg doing, you know, weird matches, or because he would only be in his 50s now.
Right. I know, according to a lot of people you talk to in the business, that he's very, you know, well respected and in-ring technician and stuff like that. But you can also say, well, yeah, but he also did, like you mentioned, almost killed Stone Cold Steve Austin and stuff like that. So how well of a technician was he? But I know a lot of people in general have a lot of respect for him. But again, it's hard to say, not to be cheap or, you know, whatever. But is that because of his death, or was it beforehand as well? I'm not inside enough to know. But going from a heel that I didn't like to a heel that I did like, let's move on to number 46 here. This man debuted in 1982. At one point was known as the WCW Phantom. We're talking about the ravishing one, Rick Rude.
He's simply ravishing.
Obviously spent some time in Florida in the early days, and then WCCW, Jim Crockett, WWF, back to WCW, back to WWF, and then back to WCW, with a brief moment in ECW as well mixed in there. So Rick Rude, most hated wrestler of the year according to PWI in 1992. He was WCW International World Heavyweight Championship 3 times. I know that belt doesn't exist, but it still happened. WCW United States Heavyweight Champion 1 time. WWF Intercontinental Champion 1 time, inducted in the WWE Hall of Fame in 2017. Wrestling Observer Newsletter gave him the best heel in 1992, the most unimproved in 1993. I don't understand that being an award whatsoever. But anyways, the ravishing one, Rick Rude. Neil, what do you think of Rick Rude coming in here at 46?
I love ravishing Rick Rude. Maybe it could have been a little higher up the list, but first of all, I got to bring up the Phantom just because WCW has such a weird thing about masked mystery wrestlers. They seem to do that a lot, you know, like the Black Scorpion, and they were doing that like well into like the late Monday Night Wars. It's just such a silly gimmick. But I remember him for a few specific things. His rivalry with the Ultimate Warrior, where he sprayed Ultimate Warrior right in the face with whatever the hell that was, and Warrior didn't do anything. He had to like start beating the hell out of Warrior to get him to react. The Big Boss Man, he had the beginning of a feud with the Big Boss Man where he left and Bobby Heenan had to finish all of his matches. At some point we're going to have to like do a good long rant about the WCW International title, just how silly that was and why that existed. I don't know. It's like too long to really get into at this point. Probably more known or maybe more revered for his NWA WCW stuff, just because he was more of a main eventer there versus WWF, where all the top carders everywhere else were just mid carders in WWF. It's just the way it was. Great wrestler. I just love the fact that he was such an asshole, and that was just his gimmick, is that he was just mean. And
that's the type of heel I prefer, though. I prefer that asshole heel, I guess. I don't know. You could say too that he has one of the most memorable moments in
Yeah.
our generation, as far as showing up on obviously Raw's War and Monday Nitro on the same night.
Yes.
And ECW also that week he appeared on TV there as well. But obviously one of them he has the mustache, one of them he has the beard, one of them's live, one of them's taped. But that was a classic moment in as far as the kind of the ramping up of the NWO in the early days.
Yeah, he and Flying Brian pulled sort of the same stunt of like being in two different companies in the same week. And Flying Brian, I forgot to mention this when we had him up, is that he's probably the only guy who got a paycheck from ECW, WCW, and WWF in the same week.
Could be.
Yeah.
Alex, what do you think of Ravishing Rick Rude here?
Those tights.
Yes.
Just oh my god. If nothing else, for pushing I guess ring attire to new levels. There's also hilarious stories about him that are probably too blue for us to talk about. If you've ever seen Jake the Snake live when he does his like in person like sort of stand-up storytelling things, he has some stories that I will speak off air but not speak on air.
Right. But yeah, I think just for his the type of heel he was, and the type, he had that body, he had the tights, he had all the heel antics, great feud with Ultimate Warrior, very memorable moment with the NWO. So obviously he was in Degeneration X as well. So him and Sean Waltman, are those the only two people that were in the NWO and the Degeneration X?
Shawn Michaels.
So he was never in the NWO.
No, yeah.
Very, very briefly in WWE.
Oh, well, no, we're talking the real. Come on.
Sorry, I forgot that even existed.
Yeah.
All right, so Rick Rude at 46. Let's see where we go for 45 here. We talked that we might see some modern day guys, and we are going to see one here with our number 45. One time known as, I don't know if it was Gix or Jix, it's Gixx. One time known as Tyler Black. Trained by Danny Daniels. Real name.
No, he doesn't deserve to be here.
Real name of Colby Lopez. Most people know him as Seth Rollins. Seth Rollins, a modern day, maybe some bias here for recency bias, we'll see, but he showed up in independent circuit in the mid 2000s, then Ring of Honor, then WWE from about 2010 to now. I mean, according to him, he's the best wrestler going today, but that's just according to him. Obviously, most known for his work with The Shield, etc. I was not watching for the most of this gentleman's career. I had stopped watching wrestling when he kind of became a thing. So I only have been able to pick up with him in the last few years, I would say. And he did not rank this high for me, that's for sure. But Alex, you had mentioned something, so I'll let you go first.
Talent, yes. Doesn't know how or when to apply it. He's very, very athletic. Great. Can't sell for shit. Whether he's told to or not. Also, should never be allowed to have social media because he will say stupid shit that will make him lose fans, whether he's heel or face. Also, his voice is so grating. It's so nasally. Rah, rah, rah. I can't stand him. And not can't stand him like he's a heel. I don't like him. Get boo that heel. I just don't like hearing him. Like he has go away heat with me.
29th Triple Crown champion, 11th Grand Slam champion in its current format. Obviously has a lot of accolades going from NXT and then WWE and Ring of Honor. Pro Wrestling Illustrated Feud of the Year 2014 with Dean Ambrose. Most Hated Wrestler of the Year in 2015. Tag Team of the Year 2013 with Roman Reigns. Wrestler of the Year in 2015. Ranked number 1 of the top 500 single wrestlers in 2015 and in 2019. TV's Mr. Neal, what do you think of Seth Rollins showing up here?
Well, I'm not too familiar with the modern day product. I only remember him from a few few specific moments, one of which being him cashing in Money at the Bank at WrestleMania, which I thought was brilliant. If it was anyone else, maybe more people would appreciate that, because I kind of like cowardly heels that kind of take advantage of the moment. So I thought that was great. And plus, I'm not a huge Roman Reigns fan, so when that happened, I like immediately keyed up Blanchard. I was like, just because that Roman Reigns was his guy. So maybe not the best wrestler, but I'm not familiar with him enough to say one way or the other. I just thought that there were a few different moments that I thought were brilliant. Maybe he should have a slightly different move set. I understand he's injured a few people, ended Sting's career, unfortunately.
Most of the people that ranked him on the other side of the 50 mark. We had a 68, a 68, a 71, let's see, an 85, a 98. Blanchard ranked him in the top 20, and one other people had him in the top 10. I think Seth Rollins is unfortunately the victim of timing. And I think if he was around at a different era, he would be utilized in a better way, and he would be maybe higher for me. But he kind of is the victim of being the guy right now in WWE when that's not necessarily WWE's best moments are happening right now. You know what I mean? They're terrible. And because he's the top guy, like that, to me, it hurts him in a way. Like I could picture him like maybe back when, let's see, like when Randy Orton and Batista and, all those guys were kind of at the top of their game. Like if he had been at the top of his game during that time, I could even see him, if he was around like in the Attitude Era, like early on, that he could have fit in there. But he would have
been much better as a cruiserweight. He's not.
Yeah.
Here's the weird thing. You either have to be like Rey Mysterio tiny, but like the superhero, like Mighty Mouse,
right?
To be, in like the WWE, or you have to be big or large or some form of, be fat or fit. He's super fit, but his frame looks like a 205 guy, yet he's put in there with people that are way bigger, and he'll get kicked down and like he'll be hurt. He'll wear like something covering his ribs, but then not sell it at all.
Right. And he either oversells or doesn't sell sometimes is what I've seen.
Or like to the point where he screams and then we'll go cross-eyed and stuff, like all those memes. I'm sorry, that's so stupid.
But can you picture him back in the Intercontinental ranks of people like we just talked about, Rick Rude and Razor Ramon and some of those guys? Like, I think he might have fit in
a USA
if he
title
was,
type guy.
Yeah, in that kind of grouping. But I just don't think they know how to use him, and unfortunately, that makes him not rank quite as high for me. I would not have put him in the top 50 either. Not trying to say he doesn't have potential and doesn't have skills. I just don't think they've been utilized in the right way.
He needs to learn to speak, without using his nasal cavity to.
Let's go right on to number 44. Someone else that might not have had the best mic skills. And I guess this will start the controversy, and we can see what people think of this one. But trained by Bruce Hart, not Stu Hart, at one point known as the Wild Pegasus or the Pegasus Kid. We're talking about Chris Benoit here, coming in at number 44.
Sorry, I'm just laughing because I'm thinking, ooh, some people really don't like Seth if they voted him lower than than Benoit.
Benoit started in Stampede Wrestling in the mid to late 80s, then New Japan, then WCW in the early 90s. Spent a year or so in ECW before he came back to WCW, and then obviously was part of the Radicals and whatnot, going to WWE around the year 2000. A lot of accomplishments, obviously, over the years. That's not what this discussion probably will be like, because if you're going just on some of the other criteria we put about, like in-ring ability, technical ability, success, even longevity, even though he didn't live as long as he could have, he still was around for, a couple decades there. PWI Feud of the Year 2004 with Triple H, Match of the Year versus Shawn Michaels and Triple H, Wrestler of the Year 2004, ranked number 1 on the top 500 singles in 2004, WCW World Heavyweight Champ, Tag Team Champ with Dean Malenko and once with Perry Saturn, Television Champ, U.S. Champ, Triple Crown winner in WCW, A lot of other stuff in WWF that I'm not even going to list right now. Best technical wrestler, according to the Wrestling Observer newsletter, in 1994, 1995, 2000, 2003, and 2004. But people are either going to be supportive of him for his accomplishments or hating on us for even listing him in the top 100. Alex, where do you fall?
I fall under the everything that happened to him and what's caused by him. I would say, if you look at it in hindsight, it was from years of traumatic brain injuries. So I don't believe he was a malicious person. So in that sense, I think once the farther we get away from, from the whole murder suicide stuff, you probably can look at it from a perspective of, okay, this was a sick man. So in that case, he deserves to be there based on.
And you mean sick man, medical sick man?
Yeah. Yes. Sick as in he was not a well person.
Right.
I remember years after, when they finally did more studies, they said that his brain. He had the brain of an 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient. So he is the poster child for CTE. What ended up ultimately doing him in and his family is his dedication and just stubbornness to the craft. Unprotected headshots, years and years of being, bashed around, batted around, and being a smaller guy that had to do a whole bunch of steroids to keep up with everybody else, could, run circles around people in the ring, probably the best performer in his generation, especially at his size. But had he come up 10 years later, this might not have happened because the industry had already changed a fair bit. But the question is, is he the cause of why the industry has changed? So I don't. If
you just looked at it in a 10-year period, he was voted the best technical wrestler, 5 of them.
Exactly. And I mean, it's, if your criteria are intensity, believability, in-ring performance, isn't great on the mic, never was. He basically punched everything except for mic abilities.
Right.
And and the legacy from him will be WWE tried to basically erase him from existence, and that doesn't help.
I think that's very bogus, by the way. I get that people, think certain things because of what happened, etc. But I think to eliminate him as ever existing or being someone like that.
You can't search for him. His matches for the longest time were actually edited out of their videos.
Right. He's not listed as a Royal Rumble winner when they list that.
Yeah, they have gone and put the matches and stuff back into the website, but for a while they were editing every video they put up. Every pay-per-view match was taken out, no references to, and it's that doesn't help at all. That actually makes people more curious as to why you're doing that, because there have been rumors for years that they covered up the fact that he had concussions and they just basically brushed them off and didn't actually get him treatment. So there's probably more to it that they tried to cover up for legal purposes, but at the same time, is because of the mainstream attention he got. This is right when the NFL shit was going on. Mm-hmm. It's almost without not that it was a good thing what happened, but out of this tragedy, you found that there are now very strict concussion protocols in basically all sports.
It's interesting, and it might have been a conflicting thing for people to vote on, because honestly, if you look at the way that he was voted on for this top 100, you have most of the people that voted on him voted him very high, 46, 26, 15, 14, 59, and everybody else almost left him off the list completely. So it was kind of an all or nothing thing, it seemed like, with Chris Benoit. I remember him most for his WCW days with the Four Horsemen and that type of stuff. I didn't watch as much when he was on his glorious reign to the WWF championship, so I kind of missed the pinnacle of his career, I guess. But I remember seeing him in WCW, and everything about WCW's cruiserweight division was awesome to me. When you have the likes of him, and we talked about Dean Malenko and Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio and Chris Jericho, it didn't get much better than that for me growing up on wrestling, than that era and that stable of people. So that's what I remember him from. And if you're a conspiracy theorist, go search out YouTube and search out different internet conspiracy theories about that death, because it is some crazy stuff, some of the theories that people have put out there.
Yeah.
The most interesting thing, though, is that where he was found, there was a bunch of cans of beer, bottles of beer, or something around him, like 6 or a dozen or different things, like on the ground near his body. But his body tested for a 0% alcohol content. So I don't know what that has to do with anything, but that's a crux of one of the people conspiracy theories about him.
Neither his wife nor his son had anything in their system as far as alcohol wise either.
Right. But the weird thing is that they thought it was so open and shut that they didn't really investigate or do any type of legwork. It was kind of an open and shut case.
And that's the thing, because like I said before, I have friends in the industry that have people that work there, and even they were getting conflicting messages back and forth, like, was there somebody else with them? Was there this? There's
like somebody would have had to drink that beer, but
yeah, and the fact that it appeared, appeared before the police got there, but clearly couldn't have been there beforehand, before the event happened, because of where they were placed. Right. So did somebody discover the bodies? Did somebody move anything? Everybody seemed to focus on what he did and not the why or how
and it seemed like it was so horrific that they wanted to sweep it under the rug as fast as possible. I'm not saying that he didn't do it. I'm just saying that it's an interesting rabbit hole to go down if you want to start searching for some of the information out there.
Oh, of course. And it really has changed the way people view pro wrestling, people view head injuries.
Mm-hmm. Neil, we didn't give you a chance yet to weigh in on Chris Benoit here.
I don't remember where I placed him or if I even placed him. There's a reason why I have kind of a blind spot after 2007. It was just like after that happened, it was really hard to watch the product anymore. I come back to it every now and then, but it was that was kind of a rough time. And I remember that day because I was hanging out on a wrestling forum and we were already talking about it. And when Raw went live with the tribute show, I was like, oh no, this isn't going to be good, because I knew what was coming. I knew that the police were going to say what they suspect, and it's only natural because the first person you suspect is always the one closest to the victim. So I knew that was coming already, and I was just like, this is the biggest mistake they could make. This is not going to end well. And I don't think Raw was even off the air, and the police were already starting to say that they thought Chris was the perpetrator. But not to just go all downer on it, because Chris did have a great career. I mean, I remember him mostly from WCW. He had some good spots in WWF, of course, but I just think his best stuff was in WCW, where he was wrestling like DDP and Raven, and had that best of 7 with Booker T. That was awesome. Just lots of great mid-card matches. Didn't really do anything with them as far as moving them up the card. Like they did like a last minute thing where they put the belt on him and then they had to take it right back off because he was just out of there after that. And my cat is being a big pain in the ass. You probably heard her, but
kind of weighing.
Yeah, it's been really hard to watch any sort of wrestling just in the wake of that whole thing. I try to come back to it every so often. It's just hard.
All right, well, let's try to move on to somebody that is still alive that we can talk about next here in number 43. Made his debut in the year 2000, so a little bit more of a current wrestler here. Been around for the last 20 years, trained by Dave Finley and Bob Orton Jr. He's only going by one name, and he's really only wrestled for one company. We're talking about Randy Orton.
I have voices in my head, they counsel me, they understand, they talk to me.
Brief stint in Ohio Valley Wrestling, obviously the developmental league, and then the rest of the time up at the big show there, feuding with The Undertaker, doing his Evolution thing, becoming the youngest world champion, and a lot of stuff in between that we can kind of talk about. Obviously, another family that has been in wrestling for a long time, the Ortons, and a lot of stuff to go off of as far as hardware. I won't go into all of them, but 17th Triple Crown champion, 10th Grand Slam champion, Wrestling Observer newsletter, most improved in 2004, most overrated in 2013, worst feud of the year, 2017 versus Bray Wyatt. I don't know about that. I didn't watch it. PWI Feud of the Year with Triple H in 2009, most hated wrestler in 2007, 2009, most improved 2004, most popular 2010, Rookie of the Year 2001, Wrestler of the Year 2009 and 2010, and in 2008 was ranked number 1 out of the top 500 singles wrestlers. Randy Orton coming in here at number 43. Alex, what do you think?
Sure. When he wants to wrestle, he wrestles. And when he doesn't, he puts on a pouty face.
How do you really feel?
Or he slams his arms against the ground and blows his shoulder out.
Talk about, though, another person that has been a victim of the WWE not knowing what to do with him from time to time. And
there was that time that he was cast in the Marine, and then they had to change it because it turns out he went AWOL and ran away from the military in real life.
That's true. So maybe not the greatest things in his personal life or whatever you want to call it, but he has been around for 20 years. He's been a multi-time champion and all kinds of different championships in the WWE. Is that enough? I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily say that he's great on the mic. I've never been impressed by him on the microphone.
He was youngest champion, though, wasn't he, for a while?
Youngest champion. Is that enough to get him in, Neil? What do you think?
You know what? Randy Orton, I thought every time I've seen him, I've just been like, I don't get it. He's a good wrestler. I've enjoyed his matches. I think he definitely belongs to. He deserves to be somewhere on this list, maybe not this high. I don't get the what was he called, the Viper?
Yeah,
him pounded his fists or whatever he did, doing the RKO, which is the Diamond Cutter, and every time I see that, I'm like, okay, that's like somebody doing like the leg drop or doing the spear. There's only one guy who can do that. I don't buy him doing that move.
He's been trying to get creative with it lately, though.
Yeah, I mean, he's done a few good spots with it. I remember somebody did a shooting star press and he got them with it, and I was like, okay, that's pretty good. But I don't know, like you can't top DDP, but gonna have to save my DDP praise for when he shows up because I know he's coming.
9-time WWE champion and 4-time World Heavyweight champion. Alex, you're not a big fan of RKO?
What's his character?
It's the sniveling heel.
No, but he's not, and he doesn't really talk. And
WWE can't decide if he's good or bad.
Well, not just that. Like he's not even like his character isn't even. He's a wrestler. What is his character? He doesn't have any personality other than, ooh, I can do a sneaky smile, and then I will give you the Diamond Cutter out of nowhere. Like he doesn't do anything.
He was someone that, and it's kind of unfortunate because if he had been around in the 80s and early 90s, the powers that be would have given him a manager.
They would have put him, if it was the late 90s, if it was the mid to late 90s, and he was sober, they would have put him with Jake the Snake to be his like disciple.
Right. But I mean, or anybody, like they could have put him with Bobby the Brain. They could have put him with Jim Cornette. They could have put him with somebody to be his mouthpiece, to give him a little bit of personality. But because they're so anti-managers in the last 20 years, they just let these guys go out there and make asses of themselves because they don't have personality and they don't have mic skills. I
feel like he's only famous now for the YouTube video memes of like where they just chop up pictures of him making funny faces and then RKOing people. That's like really, what has he done? Like, what has he done that was impressive or memorable?
Right, and it's almost like he wants to be this character that doesn't speak and doesn't emote and doesn't do stuff. So he's like this psychotic guy. But then it never seems to come together for me. And then like he's been this heavyweight champion, but then he loses like ridiculous matches to nobody. And I'm just like, are you trying to make a joke of him? Why is he still around? What purpose is he serving in the company?
His purpose is to have Brock Lesnar cut his head open. That's about it.
So I get the physique. I get the body. I get that there should be some potential there maybe. And I get that he's been around for a long time. So, I mean, I guess you could make an argument that he does deserve to be in the top 100. I think this is too high, probably.
His character is basically that he doesn't age in 20 years because he looks almost the same.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah. All right. Well, let's see if we can get on to somebody that we have more agreement on in our number 42 selection. He debuted in 1988. He was trained by Jake Roberts. We just mentioned Jake Roberts. He was also trained in the WCW Power Plant. Let's see. Ring names. Well, they only list one. I swear he had something else, but it's interesting because he did make an appearance in WWE originally before WCW, but nobody knows him except for WCW, probably. We're talking about Page Joseph Falkenberg, also known as Diamond Dallas Page.
Self high five.
Neil just mentioned him, so that's kind of crazy that he came up next on the list. Let's see. He was in the WCW World Heavyweight Champion 3 times, Television Champ once, U.S. Champ twice, Tag Team Champ 4 times with Bam Bam Bigelow and Chris Kanyon twice, and with Kevin Nash twice, WCW Triple Crown Champion. This says Lord of the Ring Tournament in 1996. What the fuck was that? WWF European Champion 1 time, WWF Tag Team Champion once with Chris Kanyon, WWE Hall of Fame class of 2017. Best Wrestling Maneuver 1997, Diamond Cutter. Most Improved 1996. Most Hated Wrestler 99. Alex, what do you think of DDP?
Deserving, probably the ultimate salesman of all time. Not in the ring, just of like he'll sell anything and rebrand it as something else. Didn't he have a run in WWE when I don't think I was watching? Or was he like the rapist or like a stalker or something weird?
Oh yeah,
like
that
Undertaker's
was like right
wife or something. He was good.
Undertaker's wife. Yeah.
He was going to like stalk her and have his way with her or something stupid like that. Like really against his character type.
Right at the beginning of the invasion.
Because like even when he started and he was a manager, he was a bit of a heel manager, but he's always been a babyface. Like he is just a likable guy.
Right.
So it was so against character. That's when he cut his hair and it was like, no, stop.
How about the How about the AWA when he was part of the, what was it called? The Diamond Exchange?
Yeah.
With Kurt Hennig, I believe.
If anybody gets a chance, watch his interview with Joe Rogan. It's a fantastic podcast where he goes over his history and everything. Mm-hmm. He's deserving, if not for being like the oldest guy to ever get into wrestling full time and like make something of himself.
Right. Yeah, because at first he was just more of a manager, more of a behind the scenes type person. Obviously, the famous WrestleMania moment in 1990 when he drove Honky Tonk and Greg Valentine to the ring in his pink Cadillac, before he ever got to the WCW and before he was, part of the different factions, I guess that you could call it, in WCW. Vegas Connection, how about that? When he was teaming with Vinny Vegas.
God.
You know what? He's in better shape when it comes to being like flexible than, at like 65 than any of us are ever going to be ever.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting guy. Great move. Like we said, it could be in some of those extra criteria. Was it somebody's move or something like that you kind of give a little bit more credence to? He was definitely, for a while known as that loyal WCW guy during the WCW versus NWO. He was one of the ones that was true and WCW true and through, and kind of had that brief stint back in WWF after everything. But I think most people remember him for WCW.
Wasn't he the first guy? Sorry, that wasn't he the first guy that would like leave through the crowd? At least on TV, where like
I think I do remember that
he would win, and he was the people's champ, and he would go out in the crowd, and they would all cheer him, and he would leave like through a regular exit.
Yeah, I do remember him always going through the crowd. And then obviously he had the whole thing with Karl Malone and Jay Leno and things of that nature that he got to work with. So definitely some memorable moments from DDP. And obviously everybody knows him now for his DDP yoga. So, whatever. But he was on most people's lists. So that's why he's finding a spot here at number 42.
Yeah, he kind of became the face of WCW during that like year and a half where Sting was hanging out up in the rafters, and
Yeah.
he had maybe the best face turn I think I've ever seen. When it was just like a regular match, and Scott Hall and Kevin Nash come to the ring, and they're going to induct him into the NWO. They hand him the shirt, and you think he's in, and then he hits Hall with the diamond cutter, and he sends Nash flying out of the ring, and Nash almost kills some kid by flipping the table over, and that's one of the scariest things I've ever seen. If you watch that clip, but that was like big when that happened. I remember like instantly he was a superstar.
Yeah, wasn't he like the first person to turn them down?
Yeah, he was.
Besides, there was always the whole Sting thing at the beginning when they had the fake Sting. But one of the rare ones that did turn him down in the beginning. Let's move on to number 41. This is the last one that doesn't make the top 40 here. This man debuted on my birthday in 1985. Didn't know that. November 23rd, 1985. Trained by Bill Anderson, Red Bastion, and Rick Bassman. Had a ring name of Blade Runner Rock, or the Dingo Warrior, or Jim Justice, or Jim Hellwig, or just the Ultimate Warrior. The Warrior. Spent a very brief time in WCW in the mid 80s before he went to WWF. Semi-retired, came back to WWF and WCW and all that jazz. Obviously, there's all kinds of controversy surrounding this gentleman who, let's just face it, if we were only grading off of in-ring ability, he would not be in the top 100 because all he did was make other wrestlers angry and hurt them. But basically did have a huge run in the WWF as far as trying to be the successor to Hulk Hogan. He was Intercontinental Champion twice, WWF Champion once, WWE Hall of Fame in 2014. Match of the year 1990 according to PWI versus Hulk Hogan. Feud of the year 1991 versus The Undertaker. Comeback of the year in 1992. Also got a whole bunch of, this is another person that must not have been liked very much by Dave Meltzer, because the Wrestling Observer newsletter, I'm just going to go through these real quick. Most embarrassing wrestler, 1998. Most overrated, 1989 through 1991. Reader's least favorite wrestler, 1989 through 1990. Worst feud of the year, 1989 versus Andre. Worst feud of the year, 92 versus Papa Shango. Worst feud of the year, 98 versus Hulk Hogan. Worst on interviews, 1989, 1990, 1991, 1992, 1998. Worst worked match of the year, 1989 versus Andre. Worst worked match of the year, 1998 versus Hulk Hogan. And worst wrestler, 1988 and 1988 and 1998. So that is like 17 things that the Wrestling Observer newsletter gave him, and none of them are positive.
Wow.
So
a little negative.
But he appears here in number 41 of our countdown. He was in two people's top 10. Obviously, like I said, a lot of people didn't have a lot of joy working with him, but he was over big time with the fans for at least a brief moment in the sun. Alex, what do you think of the Ultimate Warrior?
As a kid, he was my favorite. I was also 5. As an adult, he's the walking, talking personification of like Nazi propaganda, superhero, eugenics. He's like a super soldier, racist ball of muscle. He's there based on how his meteoric rise was and how immensely huge he was for like 3 years.
Yeah, that entrance music and that entrance and the way that people would get up off their feet for him.
He was tired by the time he got to the ring because like he was not a tall man. No. And to be like 320 pounds of like pure muscle and be like 5'9" or 5'10" maybe. The amount of steroids that man took, he hardened every artery in his body.
Yeah.
So
he was a comic book character.
Oh yeah, Distrucity. That
Oh,
word. Look
God.
that up. He, from everybody that's ever worked with him, everybody that's even talked to him, especially now, like he was put in the Hall of Fame. They did all that stuff. Listen to JR or anybody talk about him. He was a colossal prick and apparently horrific to women. So I have no idea how his wife stayed married to him except for money. And she's got a job at the WWE now for whatever reason as one of the writers, really.
It's funny though, because you interview people, you know, a lot of times when you're interviewing celebrities or singers or actors or wrestlers or athletes or whatever, a lot of them will not openly talk about people they had problems with. You know what I mean? They think it's unprofessional to slam on people. No, but I'm just saying, like, even back in the day, like, people, if you say like who is the worst person to work with or who is your least favorite person to wrestle or different stuff, to a man, every single person that worked in his era says him.
Well, and that's the thing. And they said it to his face. They said it to everybody, but Vince loved him because Vince always had hard-ons for giant, muscly dudes.
And he is the number one example for, obviously we already talked about Chris Benoit and how concussions and head trauma and everything can cause that type of stuff. But it can also cause what it caused with him, which is he's just flipping insane. Well, like nothing he says makes sense.
And when you saw him come back, like when he came back in 2014, that's when I started watching around 2013, 2014. Like he was out of breath talking. And it's like he wasn't even pumped up. He was still muscular, but he wasn't what he was. It's like he did so many steroids and so much HGH and so much of this that he permanently damaged his body. And yet he would still work out.
I will admit, though, as a child, I was one of the thousands and thousands of people who was super convinced when he made his comeback to WWF that was a different person. Well, like I was 100% on board with the fact that there was two different Ultimate Warriors when I was a child.
And that's the thing, because his body changed so many times because he just started taking, it was Dianabol for this, and then that became illegal. Right. So now it's something else I'm taking. That last match that he had for an independent company in like 2010 or 2009, 2010, whatever it was, there's a video of him. He's blown up, like walking out of the back. I could not believe somebody that muscular could have zero cardio. And then you compare him to his partner Sting, who was big. He wasn't quite as big. Like he was actually at the beginning, they were about the same size. And the Sting has some of the best cardio in like wrestling history. And even in his mid 50s was wrestling better matches. His match where he got injured with Seth Rollins was a better match than Warrior ever had, even in his 20s.
The only time Sting was ever out of shape was after he was relegated to the rafters for like 2 years.
Yeah, or maybe actually the last year or two at TNA he was, and then he got back into shape for that last run at WWE.
Years ago, probably about 2 years ago, I binge watched all the Hall of Fames for WWE because I liked listening to all the speeches and whatnot. Ultimate Warrior is probably at the top of the list for worst Hall of Fame speech. And I don't understand why he thinks that nasal thing that he did was something. Like that just bugs me. Yeah. Oh my God! Please don't ever do that again.
And if you read it in the comic book, it's skronk.
Oh my God. Neil, thoughts on Ultimate Warrior before we move on?
Well, I can think of 2.5 good matches that he had. I liked the one he had with Hulk. I thought that was maybe one of his better matches. The only one that really topped it was him and Randy Savage the next year. I thought just tore the house down. And of course, it was the match with the Honky Tonk Man where he took the IC belt off.
Yeah, his debut was amazing. Was
yeah, but talk about hitting people too hard. Like Honky Tonk Man himself said that when he took that flying shoulder tackle, that was the hardest he'd ever been hit. I've heard lots of people say when they get big, when they get muscly, that's not like really good aerobically. Like you don't have much. You don't really have a lot of longevity. You run out of breath really quickly. Well, I've heard Ric Flair say that. Like Ric Flair used to be huge, and he slimmed down because he didn't have the ability to go very long.
Well, if he was going to do anything in the ring, you were going to feel it because he didn't know how to pull anything back.
Like Benoit got big, but like he was big. Nobody was ever really that big. But like even when like Benoit and some of these other guys, you hear about them getting big. Like even Hogan. They could still move fairly well. Or like
Batista is the closest I can think of to somebody that was that ripped.
Yeah, but even Batista didn't hurt people.
Right.
Like he tried his best not to. He hurt himself because when you're that lean, you can snap every muscle from tearing it the wrong way.
Right. I think Ultimate Warrior really doesn't check that many boxes except for memorable.
Well, I mean, I have like 7-Eleven, cups from slushies that I've got. I've got a cup of him that I found at a thrift store for 10 cents from 1991, like a WWF cup. And I was like, so that's my cup. Like,
right.
As a nostalgia character, he's great. But
yeah, he's got the nostalgia. He's got the memorable moments, but he doesn't have the mic skills. He doesn't have the in-ring ability.
Put the rocket fuel in the rocket ship. It's more like put the Dynaball in my butt. And that's about all you can say about him is like, fill me up. And no, you're full, buddy. You don't need any more.
All right, it's on to the top 40 then, and we are going to start with a gentleman that made his debut in 1986, trained by Hiro Matsuda. At one point, he was known by the ring name Doom #1. Also, at one point, was known as Farouk, but most people know him as Ron Simmons.
Damn!
Obviously a professional wrestler, a football player. I don't have the list going, but as far as people that played in the NFL or professional football, he would be on that list as well. Along with, I think that's where he met Lex Luger, actually. But spent a lot of time in both WCW and in WWF. He was the Inspirational Wrestler of the Year in 1992, according to PWI. WCW World Heavyweight Champion once, WCW World Tag Team Championship once with Butch Reed, obviously as Doom. U.S. Tag Team Championship once with Big Josh. I don't know who that is. WWF Tag Team Champion 3 times with JBL. WWE Hall of Fame in 2012. TV's Mr. Neil, what do you think of Ron Simmons being our first one in the top 40?
Interesting. I like him, but it seemed like he grew to be a good wrestler like much later. Like I remember his WCW run, but it was like really nothing to it. I know they put the belt on him so he could be the first African American wrestler, and that's fine. He was a good wrestler at the time, but he wasn't like maybe a little too soon for him because I don't know. He just seemed kind of like a white hat good guy. He just didn't seem to really have much charisma. He didn't get that charisma, that damn that he used to do. He didn't get that until WWF.
I think the one thing for me that's most memorable, or not most memorable, the one thing that gets him on the list for me is obviously at #1, you do have the whole first African American WCW World Heavyweight Champion. But to me, more important than that is the way that he was able to reinvent himself over and over to have this impressive longevity, because you had his tag team run with Doom, you had his world heavyweight in WCW, you had the Nation of Domination as Farouk, you had the APA, and et cetera, et cetera. So I mean, it's something about how long he's been able to make himself relevant, where a lot of other people that were around in his early days didn't have the ability to keep reinventing themselves. One thing that is clear based on how people ranked him is that everybody was in agreement, because the range that people ranked him is not very big. We have one person in the 61, but otherwise it's, listen to how close these numbers are: 54, 41, 39, 35, 35, 34. I mean, I could keep going, but everybody had him in the 30s, 40s, 50s. Alex, is he deserving to be here in the top 50?
Probably. He probably got in a lot based on being, he wasn't the first African American champion.
First WCW.
Yeah, the first on like national television, like on cable, because you had Sonny King and some of these guys in the 50s that were, but that would be regionally, like in small towns. But yeah, he was probably high profile that way. See, as a little kid, I thought, even though it's completely wrong, but again, little kid brain, I thought he was the guy from the friend on Magnum PI. Legitimately, as a little kid, I was like, Magnum PI guy's wrestling, so I liked him.
That's awesome. I couldn't stand him in Nation of Domination because I was not a fan of that faction, but
I would say he's 61 and he still looks like he can wrestle.
Yeah. And he can still say damn.
Yeah.
So you got that going for him. So that is our number 40. 39, we're going to have a more recent wrestler again. And I'm going to say, like, up front, that the modern day wrestlers that we're talking about today are the only ones I have a problem with. And maybe you guys will disagree, but he debuted in 1999, trained by Shawn Michaels in the Texas Wrestling Academy. Relative of John Laurinaitis and Nikki Bella. Ring name of the Dynamic Dragon, the American Dragon,
Okay.
Bryan Danielson, Daniel Wyatt, or just Daniel Bryan. So he is who is coming in at number 39. Obviously, has had a lot of success in WWE recently. A World Heavyweight Champion, WWE Champion 4 times, Intercontinental Tag Time, with SmackDown and on Raw with Kane and Rowan, U.S. Champion, 26 Triple Crown, 6 Grand Slam. I'm not going to keep going. Alex, what do you think? Is he more deserving than, say, Seth Rollins, who we talked about earlier?
Then Seth, yes. But he's here for 2 reasons, both named Mike. One Blanchard and one Dodd. That's the reason. I bet you he was probably listed either in the top 3 or maybe even number 1 from Dodd. And Blanchard probably put him in his top 10. He hasn't been able to do, like, he does a lot of stuff, but he was a better wrestler before he hit WWE.
Yeah, you think, but with the do you have a specific time frame that he was?
His stuff in Ring of Honor, even though the production value on those shows, they were a small indie group back then, really small. But his stuff that he was doing with like CM Punk back in like 2005, 2004, he looks like one of Snow White's 7 dwarfs if they grew. He has, but what's undeniable is he has a way of connecting with people on like the everyman level. So he looks like, hey, my neighbor George is wrestling, and he's also a really good guy, so we should cheer for him.
I'm getting this right. The Wrestling Observer newsletter named him the best technical wrestler 2005 through 2013, every year from 2005 to 2013.
That would sound about probably right.
I didn't watch during his first half of his career. I think my problem, I've only watched him again like in the last 3 to 4 years, and it just seems like, again, another one of those people that they can't fucking decide what they want to do with him.
That's because he wasn't ever supposed to wrestle again after his head injuries, and WWE was all too happy to not have him there because it took the focus off of him and put it on Roman where they wanted it. He's here because his run where he organically got the crowd behind him was the biggest thing to happen since Steve Austin. Bigger than Becky Lynch, bigger than anybody else since Steve and The Rock. As far as like, we're talking everybody loving him to the point where it's one of the only times in history Vince had to change the main event at WrestleMania. Like,
I mean, a lot of people are in agreement. I mean, he's got ranked 26, 28, 28, 28, 38, 41. I mean, a lot of people had him in this range. But I just didn't because I wasn't as exposed to him.
He is similar to like AJ Styles, where AJ's best work really was from like 2002 to 2009 in TNA.
Mm-hmm. Neil, what do you think of Daniel Bryan being here?
Not really that exposed to him. Every time I've seen him wrestle, he was fine. I thought he was
he does check a lot of the boxes. Yeah. I mean, he is technical. He is good on the mics. He does have that ability to get the fans behind him. So I see how he checks a lot of boxes. I just haven't seen him long enough to know if he deserves top 100 or not.
How high did the 2 mics rank him?
Actually, Mike Blanchard did not rank him.
Wow. Whoa, upset. Oh, no, wait. Sorry, Roman's his guy.
Yeah, so we'll have to wait and see on some other guys that he ranked. So Daniel Bryan, number 39. Let's move on to number 38, which is another modern day guy. So we'll see how you guys think he compares to both Daniel Bryan and Seth Rollins. Debuted in 1998, trained by Rick Michaels, went by the ring name Mr. Olympia at one point. But other than that, it was basically the aforementioned AJ Styles.
Get ready to fly.
AJ Styles one spot higher than Daniel Bryan. Obviously, a lot of time in TNA. Alex, I think you're probably most familiar with him, so I'll let you go first.
I remember seeing him in that era of 2012, 2013 when I started watching again. I was like, okay, what's TNA doing? Because they were basically copying like week to week what WWE was doing. Like Daniel Bryan was on the huge meteoric rise with his beard and hair and everything. And they basically cast Eric Young at TNA to be the exact same character fighting the Authority. It was the exact same storyline. Like if you were to go watch it week to week, I was like, how are they doing this? It's the same story. But at the same time, you also had AJ Styles doing crazy flippy stuff. And when I say crazy, like you see a lot of the like Mexican wrestlers and they do the flips and everybody catches them and it seemed very perfectly timed and the flips are executed basically the same every time, where it's very precise and they land in a very specific way. If you look up some of AJ's early stuff, if you look up like a Titantron compilation from like the early 2000s with him, he would do these things where like he would run, and jump over the top rope, but he would jump and do a somersault and land like he's riding a bicycle on somebody. Like it was weird. Like he looked like he was flying through the air with like total disregard for how he lands, even though he would still land perfect. A lot of like stuff that people his size shouldn't be able to do, he was doing. And like people forget he debuted, like he's the last wrestler from the Attitude Era that WWE signed, not Sting, because he came over. He was on WCW Thunder in like the last month or two before, and he was part of what was like Air Raid or something. He was supposed to be like a fighter pilot, like a Top Gun sort of thing. And they were in a tournament and they lost. So he was signed to a contract. The last signee, basically, him and his partner to WCW before they folded. And then he's gone for years. People compared him to being like the John Cena of WCW, if John Cena could wrestle. John Cena can't really wrestle. Okay, sorry. John Cena is going to be in your top 2 for Blanchard. But basically he was.
You're not wrong, by the way.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Okay, so it's going to be, is it Roman and him or Hogan and him? It's one of those two. Basically his thing, what was going against him was he was bad on the mic until he left TNA to go to New Japan for 2 years. And when he was in New Japan, what miraculously happened was New Japan has basically zero input on what you want to say in your promos. And I mean zero. On national broadcast television, they will call somebody and they'll say, I'm going to beat the fuck out of you, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to have your wife. They'll say horrible shit that you could never get away with on American TV. Like full rated R, NC-17 level stuff.
I want to watch this now.
Like they like, and they all, I can find you some clips and show you. It's not just him. Like they'll say stuff like, watch out, I'm going to bend your wife over and have my way with her. They'll say stuff like that because the audience there, half of them don't speak English. And they'll subtitle them with whatever they want to put. And they'll say stuff. And so you can mess up, you can flub your lines, you can make things up on the fly that don't necessarily make sense. And as long as you get your point across, they don't care. So he basically had a national stage where he was wrestling in front of, regularly 10 to 20,000 people, 50,000 at the Tokyo Dome, and could do whatever he wanted without any scrutiny, no scripts. And then he magically shows up at the WWE and he's talking like he had been a good talker for 10 years.
Yeah, very loved by the Wrestling PWI and the Wrestling Observer newsletter. He was Match of the Year 2016 versus John Cena at SummerSlam, Tag Team of the Year 2006 with Christopher Daniels, Wrestler of the Year 2016 through 2018 for PWI. Best flying wrestler in 2005, best wrestling maneuver for the Styles Clash a couple times, most outstanding wrestler 3 times, wrestling match of the year versus Minoru Suzuki. So a lot of stuff as far as that goes. Neil, any last thoughts about AJ Styles?
Not a lot of experience watching him, but from what I've seen, as with Daniel Bryan, from what I've seen, top-notch stuff. Whenever I see him in TNA, I was just like, wow, he really needs to be in a better company.
All right, let's move on to number 36, a little more old school. This man debuted in 1982. He was once known as Super Olympia, also known as Marty Lundy, but most of us know him as Arn Anderson. Of the Four Horsemen getting talked about here at number 36. Everybody knows who Arn Anderson is, so I don't need to go into a ton of it, but WWF Tag Team Champion one time with Tully Blanchard, WWE Hall of Fame in 2012 as a member of the Four Horsemen, and then of course a lot of WCW stuff, including World Television 4 times, tag team with Ole Anderson, tag team with Tully Blanchard, Larry Zbyszko, Bobby Eaton, Paul Roma. Mostly known for his Four Horsemen and Ric Flair association. TV's Mr. Neal, what do you think of Arn Anderson being number 36?
Just a really good, tough guy. One of these wrestlers that shows that you really don't have to be a high flyer. You don't need to be doing all the goofy gimmicks, the goofy moves or anything. You could just be like a solid, good wrestler and be one of the best out there. I thought he was great. Didn't really get a whole lot of time watching him just because I came into WCW around like 96. I think he suffered a career-ending injury somewhere around there. Right. Saw a few of his matches. I saw like some of the matches he had before that. He actually wrestled Ric Flair. Saw him wrestle in a bunch of his tag team matches in WWF. I really loved him at the Survivor Series. Him like looking for a tag team partner. He doesn't know where to turn. He's like going one direction or the other. It was like highlighted in an OSW review. They call it the Aloha Arn, which is a really funny spot. I wish I could talk more about him. I just haven't seen him wrestle a whole lot. Really famous promo he did passing the torch to
Kurt Hennig.
Kurt Hennig, yeah, and
even at my spot.
Yeah, the whole my spot thing that was
not
really
a dog spot.
very emotional moment on Monday Nitro.
Emotional one week, comical the next.
Yeah.
A lot of people in agreement, though. People ranked him 33, 26, 42, 38, 55, 59. So he comes in here at 36. Is that a good spot for him, Alex?
I'd say so. I'm also pretty sure that from like 1995 to 1997, he drove my school bus because he looked like 90% like him. And I always wondered, I would watch him like, I would go, okay, well, whenever my driver was a different driver on Monday, I'm like, it's because he's down in like North Carolina wrestling and he'll be back tomorrow to drive us to school. It's neat seeing him sort of come out of semi-ish retirement to do stuff on AEW. He's been behind the scenes for like 20 years. There was something said that he was employed for 18 years straight at WCW and then 18 years straight at WWE right after. So he might have been like a wrestler with the longest employment at the 2 largest companies.
Interesting. I think definitely very deserving of being in the top 100. I think 36 is a good spot for him. Basically, from here on out, you had to be on almost all of the lists to be mentioned. I mean, most lists that someone's left off, I think the rest of the way is like 2 to 3. So you definitely get into the universal appeal here from number 35 on. So for number 35, we're talking about a man that debuted in 1974, trained by both Dory Funk Jr. and Terry Funk. Didn't really have too many ring names, even though he did wrestle for Mid-South and for NWA and for All Japan and mainly WWF, although he did spend a tiny bit of time in WCW. We are talking about maybe one of the best heels in the history of the business. I'm surprised he's not a tiny bit higher. Number 35 is the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase.
Everybody's got a price. Everybody's gonna pay. 'Cause the $1 Million Man.
Oh, for a second there, I thought you were going to scare me by saying Roddy Piper. I said, no.
People were all over the board though on Ted DiBiase. I said that he was ranked almost on everybody's list, but he goes from being ranked 2 to being ranked 93.
2. Has anybody ever seen him wrestle? I don't mean that sarcastically. I mean, like, has anybody actually ever seen him wrestle?
Oh yeah,
I've only ever seen him as a manager ever.
Watch the early Royal Rumbles, because there's quite a few of them where he was setting records for like the most time in the Royal Rumble originally.
I think it just went over my head because I honestly thought he was a manager like his entire career.
No, that wasn't really until about 92, 93, somewhere in there. But if you watch like his late 80s stuff, like he was one of the workhorses. Like he could go for days and not get tired. He had crazy good stamina. Obviously, he's good on the mic and he's got the charisma going. And this is the type of heel, like I said, with Rick Rude or with $1 Million Man. These are the types of heels that I prefer a little bit more over like the heel of like Owen Hart. So I was a big fan. Go ahead.
Like, every wrestler on the roster makes more money than $1 million a year now. So his gimmick should have been the $1 Billion Man.
That was Billionaire Ted later on, but great vignettes. That's something that is lost on, I think, a lot of companies these days, is how much work was put in by people like Bruce Pritchard or other people that were really doing the vignettes to set up characters before they actually debuted. And Ted DiBiase had a ton of great stuff. They did great stuff for Mr. Perfect, for Razor Ramon, but Ted DiBiase was another one where they did not just great vignettes, but great little things inside the ring, to kind of show that everybody had a price and kind of what he was made of. So I am a big fan, but Neil, I know you're probably even a bigger fan, so I'll let you go right now.
His vignettes were awesome. The way they came about with that is he was basically supposed to be Vince. That was basically the Vince gimmick as a heel. I think he was the heel of the late 80s. He was the guy who was most in the face of Hulk Hogan for the bulk of the late 80s. And I'm even putting him over like Andre, just because of how charismatic he was, and he was a great wrestler. He was one of those guys that was like a really technical wrestler at a time when like WWF was much more like big muscle guy pounding you in the face and throwing you on the ground. He was a technical wrestler, and I really miss having a heel like that, just because he was like I said, he had such charisma. He had that cackle that he would do. Greatest laugh, put him way over Jim Neidhart, like greatest laugh of all time.
He also was someone that lived the gimmick everywhere. Like when he was out and about, like they gave him like thousands or whatever of dollars to carry around with him at all times, just because they didn't want him to break that gimmick and not be able to like act like he had a lot of money or pay for whatever he needed to pay for. So it must have been a nice gimmick to have. Hey, I need this gimmick where you guys give me a lot of money at all times.
If only they could have given him, a decent suit to wear at that Raw reunion, because it looked like somebody like used a glue stick to put on some felt for the dollar sign on the one lapel, and then everything else was like, ugh.
Yeah, they didn't spend as much time as they did with the $1 Million Belt back in the day. But one of the greatest heels of all time. If we were having like a top 50 heel list, he would be towards the top in my book, at least. So number 35 here, we're going to go to number 34. I would say that this man has some things in common with some of the, at least one person we've mentioned before. I'll let you guys decide who that is, but, I guess he's memorable. He debuted in 1997, trained in the WCW power plant, and a long undefeated streak. And we're not talking about Tatanka. We're talking about Bill Goldberg. number 34. I had him actually ranked at number 35, and he came in here at number 34. For me, he's very memorable. He's got the physique, but I don't see the mic skills, and I don't see the technical ability in the ring to make him ranked higher than what I did with 35.
Behind the scenes are a big factor too, and I don't think we've talked about that much. The like going to children's hospitals, doing charity work and all that. He was like one of the prototypes to do all that before pretty much anybody was doing it.
Yeah.
Like
At first, I thought you were going to say behind the scenes, like in the locker room, because I was like, nobody liked him in the locker room.
No, but he was like somebody who, like, one of the reasons he would give for, you can't make me a bad guy is I have to go to every hospital in every town I go to talk to kids. And he would go to schools, and he would do so. From trying to be a role model, like just a big badass role model, cool. Had a little crossover appeal, did some movies. He's probably more liked in the last 2 years than he's almost ever been.
Yeah, I could see that. I don't think that it's about being necessarily not being liked. I think a lot of people do like him, and especially when you have put him up against like Lesnar back in the day, I think. But there was just that one time where both of them were going out, and that was just a travesty of a match between those two that people were just like booing and just hating both of them.
Oh yeah, but then they did the good one when he came back,
right,
and also being in Bizarro Land Toronto made a big difference too.
I mean, I think he's had definitely some very memorable moments, obviously with WCW and his battle with Hogan and NWO, etc., his undefeated streak. So I think he's got a lot of that going. Does not have a lot of love from other wrestlers as far as how he acted in the locker room or how he would refuse to do stuff in the ring, which a lot of them do charitable work, but they still also know that they have to lose and do stuff, on TV.
But
except for Hogan.
People still like him more than like Warrior, though. He's basically he was basically WCW's Warrior, only not
quite a
complete horrible person.
Right. Except a good person instead of a terrible person. I get that. But I can't rank him above some of the other people that we haven't mentioned yet that had the...
I was joking saying he should be higher. I think as far as like iconic, I think people might rank him higher because not only has he done stuff more recent, but if you think of a lot of the old timers that have come back, even though that match he had like way overseas was not the best, but that's also concussion, not ideal situations, everything. If you keep him down to like a 3 or 4 minute match, he can be that guy that really pops the crowd still, even though he's in his 50s.
Yeah. Right. Interesting. Nobody had him in their top 10. A lot of the people we've talked about today, at least one person has had in their top 10. So like Luthez, Owen Hart, Rick Rude, Seth Rollins, DDP, Ultimate Warrior, Ted DiBiase, all have been in someone's top 10. Bill Goldberg, the highest he got was 11. Neil, what do you think of Bill Goldberg?
I think it just comes down to how limited his arsenal was. He wasn't like he was a solid wrestler. He just wasn't a very technical one. He basically had 2 big moves, and then like the rest of it was just like him pounding on you.
He did do those moves well, though.
Yeah, I can mainly speak to what it was like to watch him in WCW because that's where I've seen the bulk of his matches. Just amazing how he steamrolled everyone and just became this phenomenal force. He just got the crowd behind him and became like the second coming of Hulk Hogan, basically. And basically, maybe the 2 biggest mistakes WCW did with him was A, putting him on the mic, and 2, B, having him lose. I think they should have like done something like what they did with the $1 Million Man, where somebody like tries to buy the belt or just screw him in some way where he doesn't have to like take a pinfall, because that just basically killed him, and it basically killed the company as well. Big highlight in WCW, him versus DDP at Halloween Havoc 98. One of the last great main events they ever did.
All right, Bill Goldberg, number 34. For number 33, we're not going to be able to talk much about this guy's matches because I don't think any of us have seen them. Going back old school once again for somebody that debuted in 1959. His real name, Bruno Leopoldo Francesco Sammartino. Bruno Sammartino here at number 33. 2 people had him in their top 10. Obviously had the belt for like a couple decades at one point, it seems like. So, I mean, that was a thing back in the day where people actually got to hold on to their belts. 2-time WWF World Heavyweight Champion, WWE Hall of Fame in 2013. He has a damn bronze statue of him. So, I mean, There's that. Feud of the year 1980 against Larry Zbyszko. He's in 1,000 Hall of Fames and has 1,000 matches of the year, including the likes of matches against Stan Hansen, Superstar Billy Graham, Larry Zbyszko, etc., etc. Bruno Sammartino, Alex, number 33.
Maybe even more so than Lawler, probably the biggest territory star in his own territory ever. Like, I guess Lawler's more because I think, isn't Lawler still champion and like that? Like, isn't he champion for like 50 years straight now, basically? And I think his company still technically runs whenever he feels like it. But as far as when you consider how big and how much money the New York territory made, like, because he wasn't just there, like people forget that the New York territory also extended up into Canada. So like he would regularly be in Toronto for weeks on end wrestling at like Maple Leaf Gardens. And like he was not just like New York or Pittsburgh's champ, he was Toronto's champ for years and years and years. And like for us, I only knew of him in the periphery. I only knew of him more so as like a announcer, interviewer kind of guy when he had already retired. So he was probably the ultimate ethnic hero ever, from basically anywhere. Would he have been the right guy to go national with? No. And had they tried to, it wouldn't have worked. Because he was very ingrained into it. Had to be a very like metropolitan, very melting pot, mixed culture of immigrants. And that's what worked best in New York and Toronto, because those two cities are basically the same when it comes to that. So very important without him, basically WWF wouldn't exist. Like they would have gone bankrupt years beforehand. He wasn't really a good worker. Like Hulk Hogan was probably a better worker than him. Certainly better on the mic. He was just the best you had in the Northeast in that time period from like the 60s to like 75. Like Superstar Billy Graham was a better probably persona than him. Like his like persona was, I am just a guy.
Big dude. Neil, what do you think? Bruno Sammartino deserving?
Sure. Unfortunately, like a lot of one of the old wrestlers, he's a name that I recognize. I've heard his name mentioned many, many times on the air. Not familiar with his work. I do know that he's like the longest reigning champion ever. Obviously a big name. I think he belongs on the list. But I'm just not that familiar with him.
All right. I think most people would agree that he belongs here, but most of us can attest to his actual matches. So we will move on. Number 32 on our list debuted in 1999. He was trained by basically the Blue Bloods, Dave Finlay, Dave Taylor, and William Regal. A lot of people will know him more than Bruno Sammartino, probably. Philip Jack Brooks. Anybody? That is the real name of none other than CM Punk. So CM Punk here at number 32 obviously knows how to get people's attention, I guess you could say. ECW championship one time, a Ring of Honor World Championship, a lot of stuff in WWF, World Heavyweight Champion 3 times, Tag Team once with Kofi Kingston, WWE Championship twice, Intercontinental once, 19th Triple Crown Champion. According to the Wrestling Observer newsletter, best gimmick in 2009 and 2011, best on interviews 2011 and 12, feud of the year 2009 against Jeff Hardy, feud of the year 2011 against John Cena, match of the year John Cena at Money in the Bank in 2011. Most disgusting promotional tactic, another one of those, 2012, exploiting Jerry Lawler's legitimate heart attack. PWI feud of the year, John Cena, most popular wrestler 2011, most hated wrestler 2012. Ranked number 1 out of the top 500 in 2012 as well. CM Punk, obviously, the pipe bomb is what a lot of people will probably reference. But Neil, what do you think of CM Punk being number 32?
Great wrestler. Not as familiar with him as as I am with guys from the 80s and 90s. I do remember a couple things. I do. Didn't he also take a shot at Paul Bearer after Paul Bearer died? because it was like the same year that he faced Undertaker at WrestleMania. I believe he did
that wasn't
that
his
was
choice though. That was
okay.
for him. Like it was. They were trying to find a way to make people hate him against Undertaker.
Good writers back then.
Well, don't have too much more to say about him. I've seen his matches. I like what I've seen, just not his era. I'm just not as familiar with.
Those who ranked him were definitely in agreement. 25, 31, 33, 37, 44, 42, 52, 61. So, I mean, a lot of people in this like 40 to 60 range or 35 to 60 range. Alex, what do you think of CM Punk?
He's one of those ultimate cases of he has like stamina on that, but he's really not a good wrestler. Like he is a guy who's made his entire career based on persona, intensity, and charisma.
Yeah, he definitely knows how to get the fans behind him.
Yeah, like his confidence is probably the biggest factor, because compare him to like a Daniel Bryan who they came up at the same time through the same places. Daniel Bryan can wrestle, circles around. But he just had that it factor that really connected with people. And then he's like, I'm going to go be, a UFC fighter, and was terrible.
I mean, he was only 0-2.
Like I not only that, like there are people that are saying like he's had 2 years of training and he was worse than somebody training on their first day. Like he has no aptitude for real fighting or real wrestling. He just thought he could do it. And I think he's tarnished his career, like his legacy entirely, because had he never done it, had he just quit and walked away, great. But he quit, went to another company, and basically showed the world that he was a phony.
But if he showed back up on WWE or AEW,
oh, he'd be huge. He'd be huge. Everybody cheered for him. I'd be happy for it too. But at the same time, it's not the effect it would have had.
Right.
Had he gone and won. Like Jack Swagger left and has now won, I think, 1 or 2 fights at Bellator. And like definitively, because he was a legit wrestler. He was terrible on the mic and had a terrible "We the People" gimmick,
right.
But he was a legit wrestler. Like Brock Lesnar, CM Punk is not. He's not a physical specimen. What he is super charismatic, and he got people hyped for that first fight. What he should have done is won that fight and then quit.
Right, absolutely.
but he, I think, would have ranked higher in most people's minds had it not come out afterwards that he's basically a useless when it comes to being an actual fighter. He's an athlete as far as having stamina and everything, but like he was one of those guys where he doesn't have really a good body for wrestling. He doesn't really have a lot of this. He oozes charisma.
Yeah, he needs the pomp and circumstance and all the other stuff that goes with it to kind of mask that a little bit and push him over the edge. So I agree with that. I do think he is top 100 worthy. I had him at 52, a little higher than I had him, but I still think he's worthy. So let's move on to number 32. We did talk about some tag team members in last week's episode. We haven't got a lot of their tag team partners yet, but we're going to get one of them right here. He debuted in 1986. We're talking about Big Papa Pump, Scott Steiner. Nobody had him in the top 10. The highest he got ranked was 17.
Was that me?
I believe so, yes.
Probably, yes.
17, 22, 23, then 35, then some people in the 50s and 60s. Obviously, what separates him from his brother that we mentioned last week was that he did have the more successful singles run afterwards, as well as, all the TNA and et cetera, et cetera. So, Alex, you had him the highest rank, so I'll let you go. Scott Steiner, 31 here.
About 4 years ago at work, I came dressed as him for Halloween. There are pictures on Facebook. You can find them. I even bought chainmail and made it look like his, like seriously. So
like it.
Most over the top, like talk about being unrestricted. Like if you haven't seen the Steiner math, look it up. That promo is one of the best things ever. He did a follow-up to it this year when he showed up on TNA back in like March. Following up that, or his just, it's like feuding with Samoa Joe. Most of his work, as far like his promo work in late 90s WCW, fantastic. His persona, the way he looked, fantastic. Horrible wrestler since 1996. As far as
a little too big for himself,
he got too big, and then he got a little better. Like if you look at his stuff in the 80s, he was one of the few guys, and he's actually probably the first guy we've seen in this list so far that was inventing moves. The
He
Frankenstein.
was like the British Bulldog to me. He was like that tag team partner, but that was strong enough to do crazy stuff, but still technical until he got crazy big.
210 pounds, and somebody would run at him. He would jump up in the air, flip onto his back, grab your neck between his ankles, and flip you over his head.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff that like luchadors do, and luchadors usually would run and jump onto you. He would jump straight up in the air from a standing position and do it, and make it look like you landed on your head. Sometimes he would land you on your head if he didn't like you. And then when he got to be like 260, 70 pounds, couldn't do it anymore. But then he started doing it from this past year. Was it this year or the year before? He was at the TNA pay-per-view, and he was doing them from the top rope where he would jump up and flip you over his head, and he's in his 50s.
Right.
His promo work, second to none from the ridiculousness. Like, it's like he's feuding with Samoa Joe, and it's like, what do you not like about him? He's fat. He's fat.
Don't ask him to do math.
He's fat. Or when he had P.D. Williams as his little Papa Pump, who was like a miniature version of him, just over the top. Or his calling Ric Flair like fat, old, and lazy. What was it? His speech on live TV where he got in trouble a few times for swearing at people.
Yeah.
Or was it? Who was it? Was it DDP he was talking about?
He did so many bad interviews. It's hard to say.
Well, like in the ring, talking about what's he going to do to DDP's wife.
I think so too.
Just every promo being so over the top and ridiculous. I met him at a local show here. He came with Kevin Nash about 3 years ago. And nicest guy ever. Talked to him for a fair bit. I was upgraded to VIP tickets because they didn't actually check my ticket. They just let me in with the VIP people.
That's one way to get upgraded.
Yeah, and I just was talking to him for a few minutes, and he goes, oh, you're a big guy. He goes, there's so much money we could have made with people like your size. He goes, now everybody has to be a twig to be in wrestling. And he's talking all this stuff, and he's super nice. He goes, excuse me for a second, and he goes over to see the promoter, and he goes, hey, fuckhead, I said I was, and he was blah 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 blah. And he was arguing about money. And then he comes right back. So where was I? And he keeps talking like super friendly.
Oh my goodness!
And then he wrestled Joey Janela there before Joey Janela was anybody. 3 or 4 years ago. Well, he's still a nobody. Let's be real.
Right.
But Joey Janela, you can see I'm sitting because we're in the VIP section. I'm sitting next to Kevin Nash. Like he's just sitting there because he's like he's tall. I'm big. We needed to have more room, so we got a bench seat. So we're sitting there, and he goes, "Oh," and I go, "What?" And he goes, "Take a look." Doesn't like what that guy's doing. And Joey Janela wasn't listening to him. Like, he was basically, you're supposed to follow what the elder does in the ring.
Right.
And Joey Janela wasn't doing that. So he goes, watch this. He goes, 5, 4, 3. And like the way Kevin Nash is talking, like very droll, 2, 1. And he points and looks at him. And Scott Steiner then kicks Joey Janela in the chest as hard as he can and throws him over the ropes and into the brick wall behind him. And he just goes, listen to me, stupid. And then they're just brawling around the ring. And he goes, yeah, he's not too happy. And Chris Masters was sitting next to Nash, and he goes, should we go in and help me? He goes, no, I'm not doing that.
I think what hurt Steiner was the fact that as he was becoming the singles wrestler and as he was kind of having his ascension to the top is when WCW kind of fell off the cliff. And I think that would have been different if WCW had not, done the complete nosedive at that exact time, because by the time he gets to WWE, it was not good.
Well, had WCW lasted a couple years longer, the work he did in TNA sporadically, like in 04, 07, all the Steiner. If the Steiner math stuff had shown up on regular TV, like when it was in the heat of the Monday Night Wars, it would have been everywhere.
Neil, any last second thoughts about Scott Steiner?
He's like Jekyll and Hyde. He sounds like a really sweet guy, but like you put a mic in his hand, he just turns into this genius on the mic. He owns a Shoney's. I just randomly I saw like some news. Something happened at a Shoney's, and he just happened to be the owner of it. It was
he stopped a murder or something like that.
It was something like that. It was like really weird. Really funny guy. I don't think I can really add anything more to what Alex just said.
He is much smaller now, and he attributes it to, I don't work out quite as much. No, he's not taking the juice anymore.
Right.
Wrestles with a shirt on, if you know what I'm saying.
Oh yeah.
So next up here is a guy that debuted in 1985. One time his ring name was Baby Bull, but most of us know him as either Big Van or just regular old Vader. Leon White, Big Van Vader, coming in here at 31. Spent some time in AWA, CWA, New Japan, IWGP heavyweight champion there, UWA, WCW, WWF, a lot of different stops in between, TNA, back to WWE. It gets confusing, but Vader is our next entrant. A lot of people had him ranked, but it went anywhere from 18 to 83. Neil, what do you think of Vader, and is he worthy of being in the top 50?
Maybe a little too high. I do like Vader. He was one of these giant guys. They really should have had him in the golden age of the WWF back when Hogan was in there. By the time they threw him in Hogan and WCW, it was just like a little too late for Hogan, because Hogan was kind of getting hokey, and he was really like the big giant heel that would have really been good to throw at Hogan like after the Andre stuff.
Yeah.
A really iconic looking wrestler though. He had a great look. He had that whatever that mask thing was. It wasn't really a mask. It was like what was that?
He had the whole thing that he had to take off as he was getting to the ring. The Japan inspired, almost like I don't know if it was a samurai type thing, because it was way bigger.
Well, he had like
a mastodon mask.
Mastodon, yes.
Yeah, he had like a mastodon hat. I wasn't even talking about that. It was like a strap thing he had on his face.
That was. I remember seeing a match where that came off accidentally, and I was like, oh shit. It was like the luchador mask, but it was see-through in multiple parts. So I don't get it.
Yeah, very, very sad when I heard he was dying. Something about that when somebody knows that they're on their way out and it's just nothing you could do about it. It was just kind of really, really depressing to see that happen.
He was someone that was very agile for someone who was as big as he was for a long time, not through his whole career, but through the first probably half of it.
Think about being 410 pounds and doing like backflips
and stuff off the ropes.
Was he doing moonsaults and shit like that?
Yeah. He was doing the Vader bomb and
doing it and not hurting a single person doing it.
Right. If it wasn't for his little hiccup with Shawn Michaels, he might have been doing some more things, because he had some big matches planned, and then Shawn Michaels kind of threw a temper tantrum and got him removed from those matches.
And probably the only 400 and some odd pound ginger white dude to ever become a pro wrestler and be from Compton.
Right?
It's like what? It's like he is the enigma.
Right. There is a hilarious match though that you can watch of him. Oh, and also another person that had drafted by an NFL team. But a hilarious match between him and Shawn Michaels, where you can see that he kind of is fucking up because he's supposed to be in a certain part of the ring and he's not. And Shawn Michaels gets to the top rope to try to do his thing, and he realizes the Vader's too far away. So he has to just jump off the rope and down to his feet. And then you can see him, like, he just literally is berating Vader for the rest of the match. Like, you need to fucking move and all this other stuff, and like throwing a temper tantrum. But you can still see them mouthing those things. And it's like, oh God, Shawn Michaels at his worst, and Vader apparently also at his worst.
Shawn not thinking, because if Vader wanted to snap, he could have broken him in half.
Right. But Vader comes in at number 31. Interesting that we go to another person that was kind of very big in WCW, maybe a little bit before Vader, but I think at one point they were connected at some point. I think he was his manager. Debuted in 1960, trained by a couple of the Zbyskos, not Larry, but some of the elder Zbyskos. At one point he was known by the ring name The Great Mortimer. Another time it was Jack Long.
Great Mortimer, that's a great wrestling name, right?
Jack Long, the King, Handsome, or King Harley Race is our number 30. Spent a good deal of time in AWA, NWA, and some 3 years in WWF before he went back to WCW. Wrestler / manager / jack of all trades, Harley Race. At number 30, Neil, what do you think?
Iconic wrestler. Not, I don't remember him being that great in the ring. I know him mainly from his WWF run when he was King Harley Race. And I never really got the King gimmick because I was like, is it a title? Because it could change hands, but it was also his gimmick. So I was like, what's going on here? What does it mean to be the king? Is this like being the champion? I don't know. But his gimmick of being the King Harley Race is how we got King Haku, then King Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and then finally the Macho King. That's where that all came from, is the Harley Race gimmick. That's mainly what I know him for. I don't remember a lot of great matches.
He had some legendary matches with Ric Flair. Obviously, he just recently passed away, and a lot of people were kind of attesting to how much of a strong, how much of a badass he was, I guess, in general. Like they said, he had the biggest, strongest hands in the business, and if he punched you, you were definitely going to feel it if he wanted you to. But in the ring, it was he had the softest hands because you never did feel it. But if he was to get in a fight with you in real life, nobody wanted that. Match of the year against Dory Funk, match of the year against Dusty Rhodes, match of the year against Ric Flair, 3 different times there between 1973 and 1983. So a lot of Hall of Fames that he's been in. Alex, what do you think of Harley Race being here?
I see. It's almost blasphemy, but like I don't see it. I don't see him even being in the top 100. If that makes any sense. Like he was the last of the old guard. Like he was young when he joined. Like, but I feel like Ric Flair came along and was like, this is what pro wrestling is, and you don't need to exist anymore. And that's sort of what happened to him. He was relegated to nothing. He had some of his finishing moves were like a headbutt from the top rope. And it's like, and it gave him spinal problems when he got older. And it's like, yeah, he's super tough, but it's like, he also didn't like that they were going to try to take his job away. So he went with a gun to kill Hulk Hogan one time for real. Like he brought a gun into where Hulk Hogan was to like threaten him. And it's like, like he was the last of the carnies that were champions. He also had he been a little younger, I guarantee you Vince McMahon would have made him his gimmick. Like he looks like a sailor or like a fisherman from like the East Coast.
Those look like a fisherman. Yes.
You know what I mean? Like he even has like a little Popeye tattoo on his arm. Like he just looks like he should be catching crabs, and then like he just happens to wrestle on the side.
Luthez Hall of Fame, Missouri Sports Hall of Fame, NWA Hall of Fame, Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame. Let's see what other, Stampede Wrestling Hall of Fame, St. Louis Wrestling Hall of Fame, WCW Hall of Fame, WWF Hall of Fame. I think you can make the argument that he does deserve the top 100.
Yeah, I was exactly. He doesn't deserve to be in the top 50 though. He's only there because of the titles. Like let's be real. Anybody praising him are his peers, or if you were like, I don't even know how many people submitted lists that are from the South, like the real South, but like that's really it, because like he didn't accomplish anything in our generation of note. He looked uncomfortable as the king. He
did.
He was one of those guys where he's like, what's happening to my wrestling, and then didn't change.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that argument for sure. I was never a big fan of his, but obviously with all the NWA stuff with Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes and stuff, I think that's kind of where it kind of carries, maybe rides their coattails a little bit into this part of the countdown, so to speak. Let's go to number 29. This man has appeared in things like Star Trek Enterprise, Waterboy, Jingle All the Way, Royal Pains, Psych, Burn Notice, a lot of things there. Made his debut in 1994. In WCW, we knew him as the Giant. In WWE, we knew him as the Big Show.
Well, it's the Big Show. Yes, it's a big fat show tonight. Yeah, it's the Big Show.
We're talking about Paul White here at number 39. Started basically in WCW, went to WWF, and that has been all she wrote for the Big Show. Obviously, he's had a whole bunch of belts, including tag belts, heavyweight belts, hardcore belts, U.S. belts, intercontinental belts, every kind that you can get. 12th Grand Slam, 24 Triple Crown. rated 2002 most embarrassing wrestler. Rookie of the year in 96. Worst feud of the year.
Is that when he went up to like 600 pounds?
I think so. Worst feud of the year 99 versus Big Boss Man. Worst feud of the year 2013 versus The Authority. Worst wrestler in 2001 and in 2002, apparently, according to the Wrestling Observer. PWI Rookie of the Year in 96 and Wrestler of the Year in 96. Neil, what do you think of The Big Show?
He's a spectacle, I'll say that. It's hard not to compare him to Andre just because they gave him Andre's gimmick right off the bat. Probably a better wrestler than Andre, but not really, doesn't really have the presence. I think he just got thrusted into the spotlight too soon. Wasn't it like his first match he won the title, something ridiculous like that, and
Didn't
it was
he
like
get thrown from a rooftop though.
Yes, I was going to bring that. That was ridiculous. And then he wrestled later that night. And the only way they could explain it was like, he must be superhuman. You just topped RoboCop being in WCW. My
Basically.
God. Yeah, his WWF stuff, there's some good points in there, but a lot of bad stuff too. And it's I don't know if he belongs this high.
All right, Alex, agree or disagree?
He top 75 maybe. He longevity is great, but like he is one of those guys where it's unpredictable. Like he would go like, remember how he was really thin in like 96, and then by like 2002 he had gained like 200 pounds. And
didn't he have like the sumo match with
he became the gimmick guy for a while, and Money Mayweather broke his nose. Like he seems like a fun guy and all that. It's just it's like, oh, you blinked, now he's heel. Oh, you blinked, now he's face.
Too many switches and too much not taking advantage of the big size and being intimidating.
How many episodes in the last 3 years have been an authority figure telling him to do something and him crying on camera? It's like, really? His finishing move is a slow punch to the face or he holds his fist out and somebody runs into it and they get knocked out. Like
basically,
like at least with Ox Baker, it was a heart punch where he would say he punched a man. Like this heart punch has killed 2 men in wrestling, and all it was like a punch to the chest. But like at least it looked like you were punching somebody in the chest. This is just like you're gonna run into my admittedly gigantic fist, but you're gonna get knocked out. Like the most protected move in wrestling is not even a wrestling move. It's a move that's illegal.
He did get a Slammy Award for Holy Shit Move of the Year in 2011 for imploding the ring after being superplexed by Mark Henry.
That was
and then they did it again with Brock, and it's like, why did you do it again?
Right,
because it's WWE. They pretend like it's never happened before.
Right. I wouldn't have him.
Or when they would build his weight, and I'm like, no, I'm sorry, you're 7'1", and like he said on TV, he's like, I got up to 510 pounds. It's like, you got up to like 700 pounds. It's like, because take it from somebody who's been 600 pounds at 6'4", you were 7'1", and you looked my body type. You were like 700 pounds, but you don't want to say that because then you can't get insurance.
He was all over the board for people's ranking, anywhere from 6th to 97th. So nobody could decide. Nobody could decide.
Best wrestler of all time.
Yeah, nobody could decide.
Was that Blanchard too?
No.
Okay.
Next up, the big men are going to continue because 28 on our list is also a big man. This guy debuted in 1992. Let's do some ring names, guys. How about Angus King? How about Bruiser Mastino? How about Unabomb? How about the Christmas Creature?
Okay.
How about Doomsday? How about Mikey Unabomb? How about Diesel? How about Isaac Yankem DDS? Or most people know him as Kane. Glenn Jacobs, number 28. So we go from the Big Show to Kane. Alex, is he more deserving of this high spot?
Hell yes. He's just more like, this is somebody, if he wasn't mayor, would still be wrestling. He was full-time wrestling for like 20 years at like almost 7 feet tall and not gassing out. I mean, say what you will about like it became the trope of let's send Kane in to finish the match because we don't have a finish. But at the same time, how many people can maintain that work rate for 20 some odd years?
Yeah. A lot of belts, a lot of accomplishments. He was a 3rd Grand Slam, the 8th Triple Crown champion, feud of the year by PWI against Daniel Bryan as a member of the Authority in 2013, tag team of the year 1999 with X-Pac. Do you know who didn't like him? Apparently Dave Meltzer. He was a three-time most disgusting promotional tactic for a 1996 fake Diesel gimmick, for the 2002 being accused of murder and necrophilia by Triple H, and in 2004 impregnating Lita.
Oh man, I love 1998 to 2001.
Three-time Wrestling Observer newsletter most overrated wrestler, and 7-time worst feud of the year. 2002 with Triple H, 2003 with Shane McMahon, 2004 with Matt Hardy and Lita, 2007 with Big Daddy V, 2008 with Rey Mysterio, 2010 with Edge, and 2012 with John Cena. Worst gimmick 1996 is Fake Diesel. Worst worked match of the year in 2001 with The Undertaker versus Chronic, and worst worked match of the year 2018 versus The Undertaker, Triple H, and Shawn Michaels at Crown Jewel. That is not a single positive thing given to him.
And yet when he retires, all Dave's going to say is how great his career was.
Right. So obviously much better than the Wrestling Observer newsletter would have you believe. A lot of belts, a lot of crazy memorable moments, whether it be with Undertaker or others. Neil, what do you think of Kane?
I like Kane. Obviously, a lot of low points. That necrophilia thing. One of the few times that I just turned Raw off, like right in the middle of that, it's like, no, I'm not watching this. There was an episode of Raw, a Christmas episode, where they're hanging ornaments on Kane, and Jerry Lawler says he looks like some kind of Christmas creature, and all the smarks were like, "Oh God." that was great. I like Kane. It was kind of like a reboot of the clone Undertaker from 1994. It was like, if you watch the Undertaker versus Kane from WrestleMania, it's basically like that match only done right. I'm sure Alex has got I'm kind of blanking, but I know there's like a lot of high points for Kane.
In recent memory, anything he did with Daniel Bryan, where they were they turned the yes chant to the no chant and all that. Like, it's just, he could be perfect as the straight man in a comedy duo, but then still be menacing. Amazing entrance with all the flames and all that stuff, like, stuff they don't want to spend money on anymore. His costume, the reveal of who he was, like he had some of the worst feuds, but then like his introduction storyline, probably the best WWE ever did in like the suspension of disbelief, like fantasy booking. Like, they've done that a lot, like the Boogeyman's bullshit, like, but let's be real, like the Undertaker, nobody thinks he's dead, but the storyline they did with him and Kane and all this, and like he was burnt and blah 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 blah, like that was like probably the best fantasy storytelling they've ever done.
I love how they followed that up with eventually having him take the mask off and there was nothing wrong with his face.
My favorite aspect of
he had like soot on his face and that was it.
My favorite aspect of Kane is that his story is so convoluted. He's got the most convoluted backstory of any wrestler ever, because he was burnt, but he really wasn't. Then there was the whole thing with Katie Vick. WWE wrote a book to explain the whole thing, to explain how it all fits together. And it's ridiculous. It's like my favorite thing ever.
5 people had him ranked in the 30s. 2 people had him ranked in the 60s. So a little all over the place, but he comes in here at 28. Only 2 people left today to talk about. Let's get to one of them. The big men trend continues, because at 27, we're going to another fairly tall individual who made his debut in 1990, trained in the WCW power plant, went by the name of Chet Lemon, Master Blaster Steel, Oz, Vinny Vegas, Diesel, or just plain old Kevin Nash. Comes in at 27. So we will go from Big Show to Kane to Kevin Nash. Obviously had the early WCW run with the Master Blasters, Oz and Vinny Vegas, maybe not his most memorable moments. Obviously then went to WWF and was the bodyguard to Shawn Michaels, Big Daddy Cool Diesel, goes back to start the NWO, and the rest you could say is history as far as his impact on the business. Super good with charisma and on the mic, maybe lacking a little bit of in-ring skills, but definitely has the memorable moments and the impact on the business. Alex, what do you think of Kevin Nash coming in here at 27?
It makes sense. Like, as far as influential or important people of the last 30 years, probably one of the top 5 most important people since like 1992. From when I met him, like one of the driest sense of humors you'll ever have, like, on anybody. Very smart. Like when you think of wrestlers, you don't always think of the smartest people. You think of meatheads, and this is a meathead who can think. And it's like, he's not the smartest person on the planet, but you can tell. It's like, oh, the people are like, oh, he was always there politicking people. Yeah, because he's smarter than half the other people on the roster. So he like, just simple shit that we would think up, other people might not, and he would take that and use it to his advantage. In talking to him, I said, well, what's the best part, of doing these, indie shows when he came out? And he goes, he's honestly meeting the fans and still, having fun. He goes, you get some extra pocket change, and because like they get paid decent. They usually get their travel covered, but they make more of their money off of like merch and everything still from like WWE and residuals and that. And I said, what's the worst part? He goes, how 90% of the fans haven't figured out how deodorant works. And it was funny because like I was there first talking to him, and because he wanted to sit down, so he signed my poster and all that, and he's like, here, come on, sit down, big man, let's talk. So while they were waiting for everybody else to come in, and he's talking, shaking his hand, getting the picture taken, all that stuff, and then he's just like, I said, how can I tell? I go, how can I tell if you don't like a fan? He's like, you'll know. And I'm standing there, and then I moved to sit down after I got my stuff, and he's shaking people's hands and all this, but then he's not shaking everybody's hand. And I'm looking, and it's like, you could see on his face, he's like holding his breath. He's like, this person's stinky, I can't touch them, because you don't realize like how the amount of people they touch, how sick they could get, and it could ruin like they have to be very careful about getting sick, especially guys in their 60s now. Like, he doesn't want to come here for $5,000 and then plus whatever he makes off merch, and then not be able to work for the next 2 months because he's like got the flu or some sort of weird like con flu or something. Yeah, and you can just see, and you see he's like blank face, like, hi, nice to meet you, shake, and he'll shake some people's hands, then he won't. But at the same time, like, just hearing him talk, and like when he's like with Steiner, he's like, oh, he doesn't like him.
He might be in the top 5 for wrestlers that had a movie career as well. He'd be in the discussion for it with his Magic Mike stuff, John Wick, and of course my first exposure to him as Super Shredder. Oh yeah,
like, I mean, he genuinely like a cool guy, but I guess the vibe people might get from him is that like he doesn't care. It's not that he doesn't care. Right. He's just very chill, and then very dry, almost British sense of humor.
Right.
And I think that doesn't resonate with everybody. I don't know if he should be this high based on his wrestling. Decent on the mic, good good body.
Success.
Kind of terrible at drawing money before the NWO, but other than that, he's great.
WCW World Heavyweight Champion 5 times, World Tag Team Champion 9 times with Scott Hall 6 times, Sting once, and Diamond Dallas Page twice, WWF Champion once, Intercontinental once, Tag Team twice with Shawn Michaels, WWE Hall of Fame in 2015. Neil, other thoughts on Kevin Nash before we move on to our last name today?
Well, I've been known to dunk on some of the big guys in wrestling, and I think Kevin Nash is like the quintessential big guy that I don't really like. He's a funny guy. I like him personally, but as far as in ring, he's the guy I always think of as like standing in the middle of the ring while the other guy's doing all the work, bouncing off the ropes and everything. He just kind of stands there and occasionally like lifts his leg to kick him in the face. And
him and Sid.
Yeah, basically that's his whole.
What sets him higher than Sid though is the brain versus.
Yeah, that's great talker, very funny guy. Okay in the ring, I guess. Got a presence. He's just very big.
I think too, what gets lost is people that are good on the mic in the last, say, like 15 years are good on the mic because they're handed material that's good. most of the time. Very few of them are just good improv people. And I feel like Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, some of those people back in that time period don't get enough credit for how good they were on the mic with nothing being scripted for them.
Oh,
like,
yeah. Like, sorry, one last thing at the show, that the local one here, he was standing there, and the one guy was, whenever the local guy was bad mouthing him, and they're making up their stuff on the spot, and the heel goes, "Oh, what? You don't have any comeback?" And he goes, if you wanted my comeback, you'd have to ask your mother.
Oh, Jesus. Nice.
And it's a local show, but and the place just erupts, and to the point where the local, or the talent there, the younger guy, he's trying his best not to break. And you can just see everybody, even Jimmy Hart was there, and he's turning away, laughing so hard he had to turn off his megaphone.
Nice. Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of him as Diesel, but in the WCW and NWO before it kind of went crazy, I was a huge Kevin Nash fan. I like him better than probably Kane and Big Show. So I am a bigger fan, but it's interesting how people might think those three big guys and what order they should be in. But we have time for one more today. So this is number 26. Everybody else will be top 25 material. Our number 26 made his debut in 1980, trained by Vern Gagne. Only two names that he ever went by, and those would both give it away. It's either Curt Hennig or just Mr. Perfect. That is our number 26. Left off of a couple lists, but everybody that ranked him fairly high, except for one person had him at 80, 46, 39, 27, 18, 18, 14, 12. So a lot of people had him in the top 20. He just misses out on the top 25, coming in at number 26. Neil, what do you think of Mr. Perfect coming in here?
The technical wrestler, other than your Bret Hart. Just one of these guys that looked like there was a logic to the whole thing, how he would just go from move to move to move, and great personality to go along with it. I mean, I again, comparing him to Bret Hart, not very good on the mic. Curt Hennig, excellent on the mic. And aside from that, great manager, managed Ric Flair. That was the best pairing they could have had, putting those two guys together. Just how well they work together, doing interviews together. I just think of him and Ric Flair freaking out at WrestleMania 8 after they lost the title to Macho Man.
Right.
Just lots of great memories. I know I'm glossing over feuds here. He's had so many great matches.
Started in the AWA in the early 80s and then the WWF, returned to AWA, returned to WWF, had the undefeated streak before Tatanka and before Goldberg. He was undefeated for 2 years from 1988 to 1990 until the damn Brutus the Barber Beefcake beat him, I think, in something.
Yeah, that was weird.
So, Intercontinental Heavyweight Champion, then obviously was part of the Four Horsemen, part of the New World Order, part of the West Texas Rednecks, and then came back to WWF and brief time in TNA before he died. He was always growing up. He was always one of my favorite. He wasn't my favorite, but he was always probably, if I were to make a list of my top 5 at any given point in my childhood, he probably would have been in there. I always enjoyed him, whether he was a heel or a babyface. I kind of liked him as both. Inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2007. Alex, what do you think of Curt Hennig being number 26?
I didn't see a whole lot of him, but I do remember him being very charismatic and just sort of having a sort of swagger to the way he did everything. Now, I think it's one of those cases where had he lived, he would have come back to the WWE in some form, probably as a manager.
Right.
Maybe some of his talent could have rubbed off on his son, who seems to only have a job because Vince feels bad that his dad died. He's horrible at everything. He's so horrible he can't even grow hair. Like I just feel like that's probably what would have happened. He would have become the manager for his son who can't talk or wrestle, and he's always talked about as being like one of the most liked guys behind the stage, like behind the scenes, and like doing some of the best pranks. And you could just see like the best people, the people that we're going to see in the top 10, maybe top 15, have unique charisma, like a unique air or personality. It's too many wrestlers today either walk the same, sound the same, feel the same, emit the same energy.
Yep.
And he's one of these guys that emitted an energy that was only his.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of that comes down to the fact that like everything's scripted now. Kurt Hennig could think on his feet and just come up with these great lines.
Well, and even if he was talking fast or with Ric Flair, like you could say, oh, their characters might be similar. It's like, no, look at the way Ric Flair, his thing is he'll stand still, maybe move a little bit with a little bit of swagger. Hennig was always ready to pop, almost like he was nodding his head, and it was just the way he would turn his body, and he would smile in a certain way that was like, I'm going to say something that you're going to either love or hate. And
he was another one of those Iron Men too that could go like the whole Royal Rumble or something and not be any worse at the end.
And you're right. Like it's like, what if Bret Hart could also talk?
The thing about Kurt Hennig is, think of what he pulled off. His persona is arrogance, is perfection, is I'm the best at everything, and he did that, but was still, even though he was a heel, was still loved by fans. You know what I mean? Like people still loved him. He was another one of those guys that had the little vignettes at the beginning that were great, showing him playing basketball perfectly and making half court or full court shots, whatever it was, and everything he was doing was
bowling.
Right. It was just great stuff. And my memory, I've probably told this before on some podcast here, there, whatever, but my memory is standing next to my friend as he walked down the aisle at some house show, or it might have been an actual Raw or whatever. I think it actually might have been a Nitro, and he did the thing where he hits the gum, spits it out, and hits it away, and it landed in my friend's lap. And
wow.
Took it home and put it in.
And your friend never washed his crotch ever again.
No, he actually took the gum, put it in a plastic baggie, and put it in his freezer.
Oh, I thought you were going to say he took it, started chewing it, and went.
No, he put it in his freezer, and I guess it stayed in his freezer for like I don't know, a year or something like that, until somebody's like, we need to throw this out. So like, you don't need to keep his gum. But I always love Kurt Hennig, so I'm glad that he's coming in here. I think you could make a case that he's top 25 material, but 26 isn't too far away. So that's it for today. Dean Malenko, Lou Thesz, Dustin Rhodes, Owen Hart, Rick Rude, Seth Rollins, Chris Benoit, Randy Orton, DDP, Ultimate Warrior, Ron Simmons, Daniel Bryan, AJ Styles, Arn Anderson, Ted DiBiase, Bill Goldberg, Bruno Sammartino, CM Punk, Scott Steiner, Vader, Harley Race, Big Show, Kane, Kevin Nash, and Mr. Perfect. Alex, what did you think of this section of 25?
You have no idea how happy it is that Scott Steiner beat CM Punk. But I think this is, there's some surprise, like the order things are in are a little surprising in some, and I think some of it is down to maybe some of the wrestlers, people just not knowing who they are, so they voted for people they do know. I don't necessarily think that like some people might say, oh, Mr. Perfect should be in the top 25. But I think he either died too soon, they wasted some of his potential, like from like 96 onward. Mm-hmm. If he had a career, like he didn't even have to be champ, but if he had a career like he had from 85 to 95, mm-hmm. from like 95 to 2005, around the time he passed, he would probably be in the top 20.
Yeah, I could see that. Some interesting trends, though, you see here, too. Some classics falling off the board, maybe some of the bigger classic names like Bruno Sammartino, Lou Thesz. Did we have anybody else besides? Those were like the two. Oh, Harley Race, I guess you could kind of throw in that package. Another thing that I noticed here as we were going through was some of the just like individual, like technical wrestlers or like kind of workhorses. You have, listen to if I'm putting this group together, Dean Malenko, a lot of people say it about Owen Hart, but Chris Benoit, Arn Anderson, Kurt Hennig, like you got some people that were really known for just being Rick Rude. You maybe even can throw in there, just like studs as far as working, being able to go and technical ability. So they might not have been all of them having the check boxes in every box, but some big workhorses there. Any other trends that you guys picked up on, or any surprises? No women today. Are we going to see any women, or are we done with them?
we might get one. Wait, did we already have Lita?
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna have if predictions, we're gonna have Trish if we haven't had, or did we already
We have Trish. We had Trish. We had China, Charlotte, and Lita amongst a couple other ones.
See, depending on when we made this list, I don't see Becky being up there. If she is, I'll be surprised. And
what about the classic wrestlers? Are we done with most of those?
Yeah, well, if we're going with classic women, we're not having Wendy Richter or anybody else showing up in there.
No, I mean like Bruno Sammartino and Luthez is at the top of the mountain.
Classic as in before the 80s?
Yeah.
We had Buddy Rogers, right?
Yep, and we had Billy Graham.
Did we have what's his name? We had the original guy from the original TV stuff. Oh, why am I drawing a blank? The one that came out to Pomp and Circumstance way back.
Oh yeah, Gorgeous George. Yep. We had Vern Gagne. We
probably we're not going to have Stu Hart. He won't be in because nobody saw. He's basically retired wrestling in the 50s. We're not going to see pretty much probably any other promoter that was running it.
Right.
So if we're going to go that far back before the 80s,
I don't see anybody that I can think of.
And we had Terry Funk.
Yep.
So yeah, like I'm trying to think of anybody that would be still relevant. Like I know that like Slaughter and them came from that time, but they weren't really famous from that time period. So I mean, Piper started in the 70s, so Piper will be there.
We've seen some people's top 10 members fall, but we have seen nobody's number one pick fall yet. Everybody's number one is still alive. So that's kind of interesting because, and for the record though, that is including 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's at least almost 10 wrestlers that got voted number one.
Did we have Eddie in there yet?
No, he's not. No, we haven't had any Guerreros.
Maybe in the top 25, obviously.
And I don't want to give all the names away necessarily, but
you can probably guess most of them.
That's what's going to be interesting because I think a lot of people could probably try to jot down the 10, 20, 25 names that are going to appear, but it's going to be real interesting to see the order and what people think of that because this is where we really start getting into the order because I've seen the top 25 and you cannot make an argument against any of them not being in the top 100. They all belong.
There could be one or two surprises that sneak in.
Right.
You won't see anybody from Japan anymore. Maybe one if it's really low, like somebody who's primarily a Japanese wrestler. You probably won't see any of them, and then the rest are going to be probably from the heyday of 84 to like 1990 as the predominant people, and then you're going to see a few people like Scott Hall probably, and that's it.
All right, Neil, any last second thoughts as you're anticipating the final 25?
I'm just looking ahead and I'm thinking just thinking of all the names off the top of my head who must be up there. We got a packed house coming up. Every time we talk about like, oh, this guy should be higher, that guy should be higher. It's like, no, somebody's got to fall. Some of these guys do have to fall into the 26 to 50 range just because of how many people are actually up there.
Yeah, that's what some people don't appreciate when they're talking about. So so should obviously be here, but then you have to take one of these guys out. We're going to see and when we go through 25 through 1, we're going to see if there's anybody that you guys would feel like should be taken out, and it's going to be interesting if there is.
The oldest wrestlers that are left are probably Dusty and Flair that wrestled in the mid-70s. Right. That's probably it. Now the question is, are we going to see Terrible Ted, the wrestling bear? Because I was really hoping a wrestling bear would show up, even in like 90. Like, have the wrestling bear be like better than whoever's in like 99 or 100, because then it would be like, if this podcast ever got their way to like, I don't know, let's say we voted like number 100 being I don't know, Bo Dallas. Bo Dallas could see it and be like, wait, the fucking bear was better than me.
Right. Well, this is also the time where people start getting nervous of people that they were expecting to hear that they haven't, because they are either in the top 25 or they didn't make the list at all. So that's kind of another interesting dynamic. So we're going to have to take, go ahead, Neil.
I was just about to say, I think I may have, I think my impression of Becky Lynch might have been a little overblown, because I'm not sure she's going to make it now.
Well, that's the thing. Like she's had a really, really good year, but like it depends on how people weighted it. Are they weighting like who's popular right now? Because like be honest, has her year really been that good, or has everybody else been that bad?
Yeah, that's true. And the other thing that's going to be interesting is what your guys' reactions are to some of the people that were not ranked on people's list, because 17 out of these 25 wrestlers were omitted at least by one person.
Wow.
So that's going to be an interesting dynamic as well. So we're going to let you guys sound off on the website. Go to geekcastradio.com, find the episode posts, give us your feedback, because we will try to mention some of that as we prepare for this countdown and when we do our wrap-up episode, kind of taking the whole list as a whole after we do the top 25. So definitely go there, give us your comments, and we will interact with you there. You can also interact with us on social media. My Twitter is @OptimusSolo. Alex, how can people get in touch with you?
You can hit me up. Either send me feedback at alex@thisweekingeek.net, Deathface Twig, at This Week in Geek on Twitter. Basically lurk around everywhere like that, and Facebook. So you can find me pretty much anytime.
Neil, what's your Twitter handle?
I generally go by Peelin Bailey. If you go to my website, GCRN.com, basically all my social media stuff is there. You can find me on Facebook and Twitter and everywhere.
And hopefully we'll have at least one of the simplistic review guys back to talk the top 25 next time. But until then, go to the website and follow Geekcast Radio. Join us on Facebook, Twitter, and get involved in the discussions. But otherwise, we will see you next time when we count down numbers 25 through number 1.
You know what? You just made the list.